After stepping into a pile of mud, the young man hears terrifying voices pleading for their lives. He possesses the ability to see ghosts, and the mud he encountered is actually the manifestation of negative emotions left behind by the deceased. These remnants are everywhere, and anyone covered in this black sludge is usually on the verge of death, including his incredibly unlucky classmate, Yi-sung. Although he tries his best to avoid him, Yi-sung constantly follows him around. It turns out the classmate is a successful YouTuber with 400,000 subscribers who earns a significant income exploring haunted houses. Yi-sung even purchased a limited edition ghost-detecting camera worth 400 million won, a stark contrast to Hyun, who can barely afford anything beyond instant noodles. Using that device, Yi-sung discovered Hyun's secret and confronted him about his ability to see spirits, finally understanding why Hyun always looked at him with such intense disgust due to the impurities clinging to him. From that moment on, Choi Yi-sung constantly pesters Hyun to join his urban explorations at all hours, leaving the frustrated young man with no peace even in his private moments. At night, while browsing online, Hyun discovers that Yi-sung is live-streaming a solo exploration of a desolate, abandoned urban development. During the broadcast, Yi-sung explains his plan to enter a building notorious for having the highest accident rate in the region to hunt for spirits. Suddenly, the ghost detector begins beeping rapidly with a reading of 700, indicating a spirit is nearby, and Hyun cries out in shock as a ghost suddenly appears on the screen. To Hyun's horror, Yi-sung ventures alone into a flooded basement, a place where spirits who cannot let go of their emotions often lose their human forms and become trapped. While most spirits turn into stagnant masses, the entity Hyun just witnessed was clearly a monster, prompting him to immediately call Yi-sung to warn him of the danger. Yi-sung fails to answer because the entity is interfering with the signal, causing the video to flicker before the broadcast abruptly cuts to black. Pale and breaking into a cold sweat, Lee Hyun struggles with his fear before ultimately deciding to head to the basement to rescue his friend. Cowering from the surrounding spirits, Hyun cautiously peers around a wall into the darkness, only to find Yi-sung's expensive camera abandoned on the floor. Hyun attempts to call again, but the connection fails and the location remains unknown, leaving him to sweat nervously as he shouts out for Yi-sung. Staring into the dark, flooded basement, he wonders why he isn't at home safe under his blankets instead of facing such a dangerous situation. Despite his fear, Hyun slowly wades into the pitch-black basement, trembling with every step until he eventually pauses to scan his surroundings. The area is eerily silent with a surprisingly high ceiling compared to the first floor, and he tries to reassure himself that he will leave immediately after a quick check. A sudden red light in the darkness startles him, but it turns out to be Yi-sung's ghost detector lying near his flashlight, drawing Hyun even deeper into the basement. Realizing he should have waited for the police, Hyun is suddenly gripped by terror when a dark shadow appears behind him, forcing him to hurry deeper into the depths to continue his search. The scene before him resembles hell, with a corridor lined by rooms filled with demons, and though Hyun cautiously turns back to avoid death, he hesitates as a ghost cries out for salvation. Hyun remains silent and pretends not to see the spirits, but a horrifying monster suddenly clings to him and calls out for its mother. Paralyzed with fear, Hyun is stunned when the creature's small hand grabs him and holds his head while asking if he has seen its mother. Frozen in terror, Hyun recalls his grandfather's instructions to bite the talisman around his neck for a brief moment of protection during a crisis. Knowing the talisman's power will vanish forever after use, he bites down on it, releasing an energy that knocks the monster into the water. Now seemingly invisible to the creature, Hyun sighs in relief as it leaves, then quickly flees while wondering if the entity could actually touch him. He laments having used his only lifeline and is startled when Yi-sung suddenly appears behind him. Hyun approaches him irritably, stating that he has already called the police and that Yi-sung will have to explain everything to them and show his gratitude for being saved. When Hyun reaches out to point at him, his hand passes right through the boy, and he finds himself grabbing only air as Yi-sung continues walking forward. Hyun stands frozen as he realizes that Yi-sung's recent smile was that of a soul who had finally abandoned the suffering of the living. Hyun calls out to him, but Yi-sung walks into a dark tunnel, prompting Hyun to chase after him in a desperate attempt to save the lingering spirit. Since the soul has not yet completely vanished, Hyun realizes this is the critical moment to act, recalling how the livestream had ended with a scream. Yi-sung had left his belongings scattered everywhere, leading Hyun to wonder if he was possessed or being hunted. But either way, he had clearly lost his mind. Recognizing that even shallow water is dangerous for someone in that state, Hyun takes a deep breath and dives into the depths, knowing he has only 3 minutes to find him. The floor slopes downward into a terrifying abyss as Hyun searches the area and calls out for Choi Yi-sung. Despite the swarming demons beneath the surface, Hyun gathers his courage to push past them, trusting that his talisman will keep them from touching him. With no time to waste, he pushes forward through the darkness, struggling to see anything floating on the surface of the water. Hyun feels a sense of helplessness as he realizes how difficult it is to distinguish humans from ghosts in such a vast, submerged area. The water slows his movements, but he remains convinced that Yi-sung must be nearby, deciding that he must search every room along the path. Suddenly, Hyun freezes and holds his breath as he comes face to face with a massive, sleeping monster, telling himself to find his friend and escape immediately. Hyun moves quickly while searching for the boy, cursing his own impulsive decision to rush to this place in the middle of the night. He feels that if Yi-sung wandered this deep into the building, he should find his own way out, as Hyun himself is paralyzed with fear. A sudden chill runs down his spine as the massive monster awakens along with its numerous offspring, leaving Hyun frozen in terror. He recalls their conversation over noodles in class that morning, when he asked Yi-sung if he had submitted his emergency contact form. When Hyun offered to turn it in for him, Yi-sung revealed he had no mother, and then calmly added that he had no father either. Feeling awkward, Hyun tried to focus on his food, while Yi-sung explained that his grandmother had raised him since he was a young child. Yi-sung continued his story, mentioning that his grandmother passed away last year and that he was currently living with relatives. After hearing that his relative had also recently left, an annoyed Hyun snapped at him to let him eat, though Yi-sung only smiled back. Yi-sung then asked for a congratulations, revealing it was his birthday, which prompted Hyun to complain that he should have mentioned it sooner. Hyun offered to treat him to dinner, but Yi-sung declined, explaining that he needed to host a special birthday livestream instead. Yi-sung noted that donations are much higher on special occasions, leaving a frustrated Hyun wondering what his friend actually wanted from him. Yi-sung invited him to explore an abandoned house, to which Hyun jokingly thought about giving him a birthday punch instead. Returning to the present, Hyun realizes far too much time has passed and despairs over his inability to save his friend in this place. He regrets not arriving sooner, but knows such thoughts are futile while surrounded by massive spirits that make finding anyone impossible. As his body temperature drops and his vision blurs, Hyun realizes he must leave or risk dying alongside the friend he cannot find. He tells himself that professionals would be better suited for this, but then he is haunted by the grim vision of attending Yi-sung's funeral. Seeing his friend's funeral portrait in his mind, Hyun admits his fear of death just as dark, tumor-like shapes begin to rise from the water. A humanoid mass points toward a dark room where Hyun spots a figure, prompting him to scream and rush toward the location. As strange spirits urge him to save Yi-sung, Hyun realizes the room is positioned too high for him to reach on his own. He asks the spirits for help and feels his body being lifted into the air, allowing him to finally reach the opening and find his friend. Hyun's mind is in a state of chaos, but he forces himself to focus on two goals: rescuing the man and escaping this hellish place. He manages to grab Yi-sung and pulls him from the small cave with all his strength, noting that his skin has not yet turned completely pale. Realizing this is the critical window for resuscitation, he knows he must first get Yi-sung out of the water for heart stimulation to be effective. Although the body is freezing and appears dead, Hyun remembers the tumor's plea for salvation and believes there is still hope. Suddenly, the 20-minute limit on the talisman expires, and as Hyun tries to pull Yi-sung away, something grabs hold of him. The monster catches him and whispers that he cannot escape because they are all trapped, just as a wall appears to block the only exit. With the protective talisman gone, the monster cries out for its mother, but its bite is harmless since it lacks teeth. Hyun feels a sense of despair, but looks up to ask the creature if it truly intends to kill them both. The monster smiles and explains that they must chew thoroughly to grow strong, confirming that they consume human. It claims this is necessary to become healthy and kind, but Hyun's expression turns grim as he grabs the creature's head and bites its neck. Hyun retaliates with a bite of his own, and as the monster screams in pain, he delivers a powerful blow that deforms its face. The monster begs for its life, but Hyun tells it to be quiet and dares the creatures to try and eat him instead. Vowing to kill every one of them and survive this place, Hyun looks at the countless monsters and begins searching for a weapon. He realizes that while these creatures are unintelligent, they are incredibly strong and appear to be growing larger. Each monster has a distinct voice and appearance, and he notices that the one he just struck sounds like a mother. The creature that forced him to use the talisman looked more wretched, and he realizes they would already be dead if the monsters had teeth. Looking at the unconscious Yi Sung, Hyun resolves to survive and uses his friend's expensive camera as a makeshift weapon. He challenges the monsters as they approach, smashing a large one with the camera until the device breaks, leaving only the tripod. He strikes a long, crawling creature, noting that the less developed ones are softer, but the monster he previously punched returns. The monster blocks Hyun's punch and knocks him back before quickly pinning his head deep into the water with its distorted face. Wondering if the creature is dead, Hyun repeatedly strikes its head and searches for his weapon while being dragged until he is thrown into a larger area. Surrounded by monsters, Hyun is bitten on the shoulder and retaliates by punching the creature in pain. He continues to beat the monster as it cries out desperately for its mother to save it. A chill runs down Hyun's spine as the massive monster from before slowly descends, leaving him paralyzed with terror. Something moves beneath the water and lifts Hyun toward the creature the others refer to as mother. A slimy hand emerges from the monster's abdomen as a beautiful girl with long hair crawls out and greets Lee Hyun with a bright smile. Hyun stands in total confusion as the girl greets him, while the ghost from earlier surfaces and urges him to strike the creature. As Hyun hesitates, the ghost screams for him to stab the creature's heart and not be deceived by its beautiful appearance. Hyun immediately stabs the massive heart with the camera tripod, and despite the blood spraying everywhere, the girl continues to smile. The girl asks for forgiveness, while the helpful ghost informs Hyun that the barrier has finally vanished. Powerful spirits pull him toward the exit, expressing their gratitude for finally being freed from their tragic fate. The spirits quickly carry Hyun and his friend to the tunnel entrance, where they are tossed right in front of two searching police officers. The officers recognize the caller, Choi Yi-seung, and rush him to the hospital after he suddenly appears before them. Although Yi-seung is alive, Hyun is baffled by the monsters and the fact that his own wounds healed completely overnight. He wonders about the girl's identity and how she knew his name, but concludes that some things are simply beyond comprehension. Realizing that seeking answers only brings danger, he decides to forget everything and look away, just as he has ignored his haunted classroom for months. He resolves to never again involve himself in the affairs of others from this moment forward. Suddenly, a ghost stares at him and grabs him, allowing Hyun to see into its memory. When the teacher notices him dazing off and scolds him, Hyun claims he was merely nodding off. The teacher orders him to stand at the back of the class, where Ha Yi-jun introduces himself as the class president who lives an insignificant existence. Naturally, he has no friends, and a bald bully snaps at him to start the auto-hunting game, leading to over 2 years of senseless beating. The bullying extends beyond him, as the group plays a cruel game called auto-hunting where they assign people roles like level 1 waiter Kim Seong-jun. Lee Yi-hun is labeled a level 1 store clerk by these malicious individuals, who spend every waking moment tormenting others. The cruelest among them is Choi Tae-seong, leading the victim to pray daily to any god that might listen for an end to the nightmare. He wishes for their deaths, having endured the abuse since 8th grade until he finally gathers evidence to request a school violence investigation. Despite presenting photos of bruises, recordings, and diaries as proof of intentional injury, the teacher remains completely indifferent to his plight. He is stunned by the weak response as Choi Tae-seong's group receives only 3 days of community service and mocks Han Yi-jun for reporting them. Knowing Tae-seong's wealthy family likely bribed the school, he feels a deep sense of bitterness watching the bullies chat casually with the staff. Overwhelmed with tears and helplessness, he realizes their parents are powerful figures while the ringleader holds a grudge and continues to mock him. The bullies joke about the voice recordings almost making the evening news before casually posing for a group photo together. Following that incident, the violence intensifies and persists into high school, leaving him feeling sick and trapped in a never-ending hell. Jun questions the point of being class president, having hoped that a distant school and good grades would finally end his suffering. Though he was hopeful 6 months ago, he is now completely exhausted and wants to resign as class president, fearing this life will never change. Just as he decides to end his life, Ignoring the ghost's desperate warnings, Lee Hyun arrives just in time to pull him back from the edge. Drenched in sweat, Lee Hyun offers his help, having been guided by the ghost who feared the class president would haunt them forever if he died. Confused, Jun wonders if Hyun witnessed the beating and quickly makes excuses, claiming he was merely standing there to watch the traffic. Despite Jun's attempts to dismiss the situation, Hyun remains firm in his offer to help, prompting an annoyed Jun to ask if he is being pitied. Jun tells him to stop meddling before he gets hurt and walks away, insisting that he will handle his own problems the following day. The next day, Hyun approaches Jun again with an offer of assistance, but Jun remains dismissive and tells him to stay out of it. Hyun continues his persistent efforts over the following days despite constant rejection, eventually shouting his determination to help. Yi-jun stubbornly refuses any assistance, questioning why Lee Hyun would get involved when they aren't close and insisting he has his own plan. Lee Hyun asks what that plan is just as the bully calls, ordering Yi-jun to meet at Boreum Mart before 5 o'clock that evening. With a trembling voice, Yi-jun warns that skipping school again will lead to disciplinary action, but the bully brings up the auto-hunting incident once more. The bully finds the situation amusing and mentions seeing Yi-jun's younger brother in his school uniform, causing Yi-jun's face to darken with fear. The bully suggests that the middle schooler could work in Yi-jun's place, reminding Yi-jun of his previous failed attempts to escape their torment. Yi-jun recalls how he once tried to fight back after a year of abuse, telling them to just kill him, but his younger brother appeared at that exact moment. While Yi-jun panicked, the bully smiled sinisterly, and from that day on, the thugs began using his younger brother as leverage to threaten him. Just as Yi-jun is about to submit again, Lee Hyun suddenly shouts a challenge to Choi Tae-seong, calling him out for a one-on-one fight. Lee Hyun tells the bully to forget the mart and bring all his lackeys to his location instead, leaving Yi-jun wondering what he intends to do. Lee Hyun tells Yi-jun to wait for him to bring reinforcements, and by 5 o'clock, a pale and sweating Yi-jun arrives at the meeting spot in a state of high anxiety. Yi-jun feels like he is losing his mind for being so impulsive and regrets ever putting his trust in Lee Hyun. Realizing the situation is insane, Yi-jun tries to flee, but is suddenly kicked to the ground as the group of bullies arrive. The bully mocks Yi-jun for his sudden bravado and grabs him by the hair, while Yi-jun silently curses Lee Hyun for abandoning him. Suddenly, Lee Hyun's voice rings out as he shouts that he is there to help, drawing the confused gazes of the entire gang of bullies. Yi-jun is initially moved to tears of relief, but his hope quickly fades when he realizes that Lee Hyun has shown up entirely alone. The leader of the bullies mocks the pair, asking if Yi-jun really thought he could win just because his friend looks somewhat imposing. As the bullies laugh at the situation, Lee Hyun continues to insist that he will help, making Yi-jun fear that his friend is truly delusional. Yi-jun blames his own stupidity for trusting someone who only repeats the same phrase, while Lee Hyun continues to shout his offer of assistance. Lee Hyun's persistent shouting startles the bullies, who begin to suspect that he might actually be insane. Lee Hyun looks behind the gang and asks why his guest is late, just as a 3-meter-tall ghost appears to fulfill its promise of help. Hyun notes the ghost's adorable expression, before ordering it to start by giving the bullies a light scare. The bullies witness something horrifying and begin screaming in terror, as Hyun tosses a small baton toward Jun. Hyun tells Jun to take the weapon for the fight, promising they will crush the bullies without consequence, since the thugs won't remember anything. He explains that the bullies will only wake up with feelings of hatred and fear, insisting that Jun must join him in this task now. The bullies are in a wretched state, appearing possessed as they vomit black mud and writhe on the ground, prompting Hyun to intervene. Hyun warns the spirit not to go too far before a tall female ghost appears and offers her help, startling him as he recognizes his stalker. Since the class president's ghost changed her target to him, Hyun has been unable to sleep as she follows him everywhere, even into the restroom. He realizes he must find a way to get rid of this ghost soon, as the prolonged lack of sleep is becoming life-threatening. After telling the ghost he made no promises and ordering her to leave, Hyun drags several of the bullies toward a safer area. The lead bully senses the immense danger and tries to flee, but he becomes disoriented and dizzy, unable to find an escape route. Enraged, the bully demands to know what Jun did and what those monsters were before striking him with a heavy punch. As Jun falls in pain, he wonders what monsters the bully is talking about while the leader continues to ruthlessly stomp on him. The bully accuses Jun of being drugged or having secret help, while Jun desperately tells himself to finally stand up and fight back. Despite his confusion, Jun realizes this is his final chance and tries to convince himself that he is capable of fighting back. Jun tries to find belief in himself as he recalls his late mother scolding him for getting into fights with his classmates. He had explained that he was protecting Yu Jun, and his mother praised him as the best big brother when he said he won. Though she always supported them, his mother worried about him being ostracized, even while she spent most of her time in the hospital. She always reminded him of her love and asked him not to get hurt, which remains one of his most precious memories of her. He realized that while he was once strong, he had become submissive, claiming to protect Yu Jun when he was actually just afraid. For 2 years, his suppressed fear had paralyzed him whenever he tried to act, until he is suddenly snapped out of it by Hyun's shout. Hyun urges Jun to fight back, questioning why he still fears being bullied after all this time and warning that he won't help a second time as painful memories flood Jun's mind. Realizing this is his final chance to escape these troublemakers, Jun throws a handful of cigarette butts into the bully's face, prompting the enraged thug to curse him. Seizing the moment, Jun lunges forward and tackles him to the ground, delivering a series of heavy blows to his face until the bully manages to catch his hand. The bully strikes Jun with a powerful blow that knocks him unconscious, while the leader returns to find his subordinates missing and becomes deeply confused. Unaware that Jun has regained consciousness and is standing right behind him, the leader is suddenly grabbed by the hair, but his superior size allows him to quickly hurl Jun back to the ground. As the bully curses him, Jun loses consciousness again with his eyes rolling back, hearing his mother's voice in his mind asking if he is afraid of fighting. Jun recalls telling her that while he is afraid, he will eventually win if he keeps getting back up against larger opponents, and he suddenly delivers a sharp headbutt to his attacker. The ghost of his mother weeps at the sight, as she hates seeing Yi-jun get hurt, while he reflects that he only fights because of the circumstances surrounding her. Determined to win, Jun and his opponent trade powerful blows until both collapse to the floor, but Jun is the only one who manages to stand back up. Jun coldly approaches and delivers a final kick to the bully's groin to knock him out completely, as happy memories of being strong while by his mother's side flood back. Feeling her constant presence, Jun expresses how much he misses her and sees a vision of her standing before him, wondering why she is still there. He begs her not to leave him alone, reminding her of their promise to go home together and pleading desperately for her to stay. Jun realizes his mother has been by his side all along and tells her that despite his exhaustion, he has finally managed to overcome his struggle. Remembering his own strength, Jun assures his mother she can now depart in peace as he feels the warmth of being held in her arms one last time. Expressing his eternal love for the person he will miss most until he dies, Jun watches as her soul slowly fades away and his own negative emotions vanish. After waving a final goodbye to his mother, Jun heads to school the next day while the bully remains bitter and confused about his memory loss regarding the previous night. The bully recalls meeting Han Yi-jun before all 5 of them lost their memories, suspecting Jun used drugs on them, while Jun attends school as usual. Jun meets Lee Hyun and reflects that the consequences were not as terrifying as he imagined when he is approached at the school gate at 9 in the evening. Suddenly, a sharp voice rings out, causing the bully to cower in fear and retreat immediately, no longer daring to lay a finger on Jun. A rare smile finally appears on Jun's face as Hyun watches from the side, seemingly a happy ending despite the 2 tall ghosts that continue to follow him. Hyun prunes the trees under the watchful eye of the male ghost, who points toward some weeds that still need pulling. Despite the sweltering 30-degree heat, Hyun continues his labor, realizing this simple deal has turned into a full-scale renovation. The ghost had cherished his first home, spending his days sweeping the entrance and meticulously pruning the branches. He had spent his life harvesting fruit and clearing weeds until his sudden death, repeating these chores as a daily ritual. Unable to leave his home as it fell into disarray after his passing, he remained there, a fact Hyun noticed during his daily commutes. Hyun had always intended to help the spirit eventually, but now he finds himself drenched in sweat, exhausted by the ghost's perfectionism. The spirit's obsession with cleanliness forces Hyun to work through the night until the following morning to satisfy his demand. Once the house is finally spotless, the old man realizes he can no longer touch or feel anything and decides it is time to let go. As his lingering negative emotions fade away, the spirit finally finds peace and offers a final word of thanks to Hyun before departing. Hyun waves goodbye and rubs his aching shoulders, only to realize the female ghost in the red dress is still lingering nearby. Determined to finish his work before resting, Hyun looks at a suspicious object and senses that something grim is hidden inside. He realizes the dark masses before him are not just a body, but a physical manifestation of intense, unreleased emotion. Hyun deduces that the combination of a ghost and these dark clusters points to a gruesome murder, a situation he wants to avoid. Fearing he might become a suspect if he enters the cameraless room, he uses his old phone to call a grumpy police officer. Hyun reports a possible body at Bangdo apartment, room 103, prompting the officer to ask if a ghost led him there again. After Hyun confirms the tip, the officer tells him to go home and stay away from the scene while he investigates alone. Officer Kim's colleagues notice his sudden departure and joke about his reputation for receiving tips from the supernatural. A rookie mentions the rumors of Kim seeing ghosts as the officer arrives at the apartment to investigate the new link. Inside the room, Kim finds a refrigerator sealed shut with tape and nervously opens it to reveal the gruesome contents within. Stunned by the discovery, Kim calls headquarters to report the homicide at Bangdo apartment and requests a forensic team. While inspecting the rooms, Officer Kim forces a door open and discovers a scrawny white dog that appears to have been starved for a long time. Crime scene tape is put up as the forensic team members are sickened by the sight, while Hyun observes the gravity of the crime. He notices the ghost in the red dress hugging the dog cage and wonders if she was the owner of the dog named Gyuri. Hyun is relieved to see the black orbs vanishing as the dog cries tears of joy, realizing the girl's final concern was for the dog rather than her own death. When asked if she harbors resentment, she hopes the dog finds a better family, and Hyun promises to find it a good home so she can move on. Her beautiful face returns as she sheds tears of gratitude before departing, leaving a large black orb in Hyun's hand. Hyun sighs about getting involved in others' business again, while Officer Kim is startled to see him and wonders why he has not left yet. 3 weeks pass and the dog that nearly died of exhaustion recovers after 2 weeks, staying at Hyun's house until a new owner can be found. His mother agrees to keep the dog since she only has a grumpy son, and soon after, a fully recovered Choi Yi-seung reaches out to him. Choi Yi-seung demands compensation for his losses, leaving Hyun confused since he saved his life, but Hyun still visits him in the hospital after school. Choi Yi-seung's manager, 24-year-old Kim Jong-hun, suggests that they discuss the matter of compensation for the damages. Hyun is bewildered after hearing the recording about the 20 million won camera, especially since the incident resulted in 5 broken ribs. Video evidence from the camera shows Hyun fighting thin air, leading the police to file a report on minors live-streaming harmful content in abandoned houses. His YouTube channel, which took a year and a half to build to 400,000 subscribers, was deleted for violating company contracts and incurring heavy fines. Facing school discipline, physical injuries, and a ruined career, Hyun is also pressured to pay for emotional damages, fueling his rage toward the other boy. Hyun grabs Ji-sung by the collar, arguing that the deleted account isn't his fault since he risked his life to save him, but Ji-sung remains unrepentant. Ji-sung points out that the manager's footage only shows Hyun acting alone, and claims he has no idea why Hyun started behaving so erratically. While Ji-sung acknowledges being rescued, he complains about his massive financial losses and scoffs at the idea of ghosts appearing on film. Ji-sung shows footage of Hyun discarding the camera and insists he would have died without help, mocking the suggestion that ghosts were involved. Realizing Ji-sung intends to frame him as the only one who is insane, Hyun feels a familiar sense of exhaustion for meddling in things that weren't his business. Deciding not to feel disappointed or resentful, Hyun asks what the other boy wants, only for Ji-sung to suggest visiting another haunted house together. Despite Hyun's murderous expression, Ji-sung offers to waive all damages if Hyun joins him 3 more times, prompting a rude gesture in response. Hyun declares that he values his life more than money and regrets saving Ji-sung, warning him never to speak to him again before a week passes. After the contract is finalized, Hyun laments his misfortune and recalls a monk at a temple who once gave him a protective amulet. The monk explained that the amulet would protect him from evil while he was young, but warned that he must stop interfering in the affairs of others as an adult. If he were ever directly attacked by spirits, the monk instructed him to bite down on the amulet until it shattered. Biting the charm and inhaling would grant him 20 minutes of protection, though the amulet's power would be permanently exhausted afterward. Treating the charm as a spare life, Hyun is jolted awake by a phone call from Ji-sung asking about the haunted house trip, which he immediately rejects. A month after signing the contract, he reflects on the channel's estimated value of 3 billion won, according to a legal forum for students. With 400,000 subscribers and high engagement from live viewers and donations, the channel's loss represents a massive financial blow. He wonders if there is any way to appeal the deletion to YouTube, but he learns that no one has ever successfully recovered a deleted account. He mentions that the fan club has started a petition, which is gaining attention, though legal guardian fees will be high and the case will be lengthy. Furthermore, there is a high probability that they will be forced to pay around 20 million won in compensation for injuries and property damage. A settlement seems preferable since he fears financial loss more than anything, just as Yi-sung begins the broadcast with a bright smile. Yi-sung greets his beloved audience after a long absence, explaining that choosing a safe location took time and asking for patience while he replays an old video. To celebrate the first video on the new channel, they decide to explore a massive abandoned house, though Hyun tries to flee before being pulled back. Yi-sung introduces their equipment, including new ghost hunting gear like an EMF meter used to detect abnormal fluctuations in electromagnetic fields. He explains that a spike in electromagnetic readings in a deserted area often indicates a spiritual presence and can cause devices to malfunction. Yi-sung grabs Hyun's backpack and mockingly decides to introduce the gear carried by his cowardly companion standing beside him. Hyun reacts defensively to the teasing, but his heavy bag is filled with high-end gear and computer equipment as if he were going to war. Hyun is so jumpy that even the sound of falling leaves startles him, but Yi-sung dismisses his fears, insisting that ghosts do not actually exist. Yi-sung tosses Hyun a bottle of water and tells him to relax, claiming the previous incident was just bad luck and that this location is much safer. After a month of constant reassurance, Yi-sung jokes that people like Hyun die first in movies, to which Hyun gives a sarcastic response. As they head inside, Yi-sung excitedly remarks on the familiar atmosphere of haunted houses, noting that this particular location was recently reported. Aside from being abandoned since the school closed, there is little information about the site, but they chose it because the owner granted permission. Yi-sung tells the viewers that the location might be less intense than previous ones, noting that while the air feels eerie, the equipment is silent. Hyun scans the surroundings and is relieved to find no signs of dark entities or spirits, feeling glad that he chose a location that appeared clean. With a sly smile, Hyun thinks this will be an easy task of just walking around, until a sudden noise from behind causes both of them to jump. Yi-sung insists on investigating the noise immediately and refuses to let Hyun cancel their plans and go home. Yi-sung signals for silence, suggesting it might just be a person or a wild animal, while a worried Hyun tries to mentally prepare himself. As they venture further inside, they stumble upon an unsettling painting in the middle of the room, prompting a confused Hyun to look around for answers. Hyun dismisses the floating paper as nothing significant and questions Yi-sung's intelligence, wondering if the phenomenon is a poltergeist since Yi-sung saw nothing on the camera. A poltergeist involves objects moving or making sounds via invisible forces, sometimes serving as a trap, though Hyun notes that a trap seems unnecessary deep within the mountain. A small dark shadow appears behind the paper and points toward it, as if trying to communicate or signal something important. Hyun immediately recognizes the warning and frantically tells Yi-sung to run, but the door slams shut before they can escape. Yi-sung screams in panic as the door becomes jammed, and they both realize with horror that the room's layout has suddenly changed. The stairs that were once in front of the door have vanished, and as Yi-sung's camera cuts out, Hyun silences him because something is approaching. They narrowly avoid an attack by hiding, but when Hyun attempts to break the door down with a hammer, the entrance remains impenetrable. Hyun demands that Yi-sung stop standing idly by and help, but Yi-sung is paralyzed by a fear so intense he feels he is losing his mind. Yi-sung observes that the surroundings shift every time they turn their heads, a phenomenon he finds both terrifying and strangely impressive. Hyun grabs Yi-sung and sarcastically suggests he lead the way if he finds the situation so interesting, urging him to realize the gravity of their predicament. Hyun reminds Yi-sung that they are trapped in a place where monsters roam, recalling a similar experience he had dealt with in the past. Although the environment didn't shift back then, the exit had also vanished, and Hyun explains that they must strike the heart to survive while advising they retreat for now. Yi-sung looks at his friend in disbelief, as Hyun explains that they have no idea how many hostile creatures are waiting for them outside. Uncertain of the monster's hostility or how to escape, Hyun emphasizes the need for extreme caution, having no intention of befriending such creatures. Hyun suggests they part ways if their goals differ, but Yi-sung stands up and firmly declares his commitment to finding a way out together. Yi-sung promises to ensure Hyun's safety since he was the one who dragged him into this mess, even vowing to sacrifice himself if necessary. Unaware of the massive hand looming behind him, Yi-sung is suddenly sent flying by a powerful blow as Hyun screams his name in horror. The monster quickly swallows Yi-sung and begins to flee, leaving Hyun behind to scream his friend's name in desperation. Hyun chases the creature and strikes its waist with his hammer, demanding it spit his friend out while Yi-sung yells from inside not to provoke it. Hyun frantically asks if Yi-sung is still alive, and his friend responds from within the monster's mouth that he is in pain but still breathing. Realizing the creature is kidnapping rather than killing him, Hyun pulls a knife from his pocket and slashes wildly to free himself. After escaping the monster's maw, the two friends flee in terror as the enraged beast begins a relentless pursuit. As they sprint for their lives, they notice a dark figure running alongside them who is also being hunted by the creature. An unsettling eye follows their every move until the dark figure warns them to duck, allowing them to narrowly avoid a wooden trap. The trap strikes the monster and causes it to howl in pain, while Yi-sung realizes the mysterious boy is an ally helping them escape. Unsure of which direction to take, the pair discovers a small opening and crawls through it into a strange, room-like dimension. They notice another exit nearby and wonder if the boy prepared this space, noting that the abandoned school environment has vanished. Yi-sung apologizes for his recklessness, admitting that while he expected ghosts, he never imagined facing such deadly monsters. Feeling responsible for dragging his friend into this nightmare, Yi-sung insists that their primary goal must be finding a way out. He recalls a previous encounter, where the exit only appeared after the heart of the largest monster was pierced. Yi-sung explains that wandering aimlessly is useless, though he is uncertain if the creature must be killed or simply wounded. Needing more information about the monsters, they decide their best course of action is to reunite with the boy who assisted them. Before moving on, they search for weapons, but Hyun is struck with panic upon realizing that his hammer has gone missing. Hyun assumes he dropped his weapon during a fall and worries that the small axe in his backpack will be insufficient for combat. His friend discovers a crate filled with axes that appear to have been intentionally gathered there for someone to use. They each take 2 axes for defense and take a moment to inventory their lost gear, including knives and flashlights. Despite losing their lights, their eyes adjust to the dark as they realize a floating eye is tracking them like a surveillance drone. The lower half of a dark figure is suddenly tossed toward them before a massive-eyed monster emerges and is met by Hyun's strike. Hyun is sent flying by the creature's powerful blow, but Yi-sung retaliates by burying an axe in its head until the beast collapses. Covered in blood, Yi-sung rushes to check on his friend, leaving Hyun in shock at the brutal efficiency of the axe attack. Lee Hyun notes that he was fortunately behind his friend and suggests they leave now that the monster's heart has been stabbed, as they both look toward the shadow figure. Although the shadow figure's body is severed in 2, it continues to run, while the pair fails to notice the monster is still alive and glaring at them before it charges with lightning speed. The monster swings a massive axe at them, but they manage to dodge just in time, though the creature's focus on the blonde-haired man causes him to panic and slip to the ground. As the monster swings its axe down to claim a life, Lee Hyun quickly blocks the strike and urgently tells his friend to head for the back door. While distracted, Lee Hyun is knocked unconscious by a powerful punch from the monster, prompting the blonde-haired man to grab the axe and prepare for battle. The blonde-haired man strikes the monster's leg, causing it to howl in pain, while the shadow figure nearby gestures for them to run toward a specific exit. The blonde-haired man carries Lee Hyun toward the exit and places him on a cart, but he is unfortunately seized by the monster's massive hand before he can escape. The shadow figure is forced to pull Lee Hyun away first, leaving the blonde-haired man to be brutally beaten and thrown to the ground by the monster, who views him as fresh prey. Despite his severe injuries, the man is still breathing as the monster pleads with Lord Lessa to keep his promise and end their imprisonment in this endless loop. The creature begs to be restored to life along with the others, arguing that the meddling youngsters have already been tormented nearly to the point of death. Lee Hyun eventually regains consciousness with a splitting headache and finds that he is unable to move his arms. Lee Hyun sits up abruptly and asks about Jo Tae-sung, to which the shadow figure sitting nearby replies that his friend is likely still alive since the monster prefers to imprison its victim. The shadow figure explains that survivors are taken to a prison rather than killed, then tells a confused Lee Hyun to thank his friend later and suggests he wipe his face. Lee Hyun asks the shadow how it can be fine after being cut in half, and the figure, introducing himself as Chin, explains that being already dead means he cannot die again despite the pain. Chin describes this place as a realm of endless hunting and killing where he has long since lost track of time, noting that there is no sun to mark the date. With no moon either, all sense of time has completely vanished, leaving Lee Hyun to wonder about a world without any celestial bodies. After turning off his chest light to examine his surroundings, Lee Hyun realizes that even as his eyes adjust to the darkness, the environment remains unsettlingly strange. Despite the total lack of light, objects remain visible to a certain degree, creating a bizarre effect similar to turning up the brightness settings in a video game. While feeling increasingly uneasy, Lee Hyun suddenly notices an eye watching him, prompting the shadow figure to shout out a command to capture it. Chin urges him to seize and crush the eye, but it eludes Lee Hyun's grasp with great agility before the shadow figure unexpectedly tosses him a frying pan. He delivers a direct blow that sends the creature flying back, but believing he has crushed it, he charges forward once more. He attempts to pin the target down with his weight, but his momentum makes him forget his injured left arm, leaving him howling in agony. When he sits up, he finds himself in an unfamiliar forest and looks around in confusion, wondering where he could possibly be. A young boy runs right through his spectral form, and he realizes he is seeing a young Chin-yu in a vision of the past. He observes the children as a ragged boy clutches a jar, satisfied with the day's haul after venturing into a neighboring village. While the boy is cheerful, his three friends are dejected after finding nothing, and that night they cower as one of them is brutally struck. A large, repulsive man calls the boy useless and threatens to deprive them of water for an entire week before storming out. Used to the mistreatment, the boy picks himself up and curses the man, lamenting that he has no memory of his own parents. He reflects on how the ceiling of this room is his oldest memory, and how a single rotten potato is often his only daily meal. In a place filled with violence, cold, and hunger, failure to meet quotas means starvation, yet he still views this miserable place as home. From outside the dark room, the other children check on Chin's injuries and tell him he does not have to bear their burdens alone. After a village girl provides some medicine for Chin, the other children toss a few potatoes into the room for him to eat. Dragging his battered body toward the food, the boy asks for water so he does not choke and remarks on the sudden, eerie silence. One of the children weeps while explaining that the managers sold the kids next door, leaving their group alone until new orphans are brought in. They fear they will all be separated soon, but the boy continues to eat, asserting that neither they nor this place truly belong to their captors. He reveals that he managed to steal a master key from a junk dealer he had been tailing, though he claims he is only borrowing. Confident the key can open most locks, he suggests escaping to an abandoned house that one of the younger boys claims to have prepared. When the younger boy boasts about clearing trees for their hideout, Chin sharply tells the fool to be quiet before the managers hear them. He plans to scout for guards while the managers are away, instructing the others to watch the window and wait until everyone is asleep to move. The children begin to dream of a brighter future, sharing their simple wishes to decorate a home of their own or sleep peacefully all day. They plan to start a garden and grow potatoes to eat their fill, believing that escaping those villains would finally bring them the happiness they deserve. The following night, they put their plan into action, but while running through the forest, Chin was shocked to find a guard still on duty. Realizing it would take time to bypass him, Chin waited while inside. The fat manager slammed his hand on the table and angrily reminded his brother that the children were his share. His brother dismissively waved him away, but the manager grew even more enraged, demanding his money and cursing his brother for daring to speak to him that way. The shouting terrified the children who had already unchained the youngest, and they nervously decided to wait outside for Chin, hoping that staying cautious would keep them safe. As the children crawled through the hallway, the manager reached a breaking point, and grabbed a smoldering piece of firewood from the hearth. He swung the burning wood at his brother while screaming about his money, but a sudden noise from the hallway caught his attention. Turning toward the corridor, he discovered the children had escaped their chains and roared in fury that even these brats were now looking down on him. He hurled the burning embers toward the children while Chin, still in the forest, reminded himself to remain cautious so nothing would go wrong at the last moment. Knowing the others had been waiting a long time, Chin hurried back, desperate to reach them and complete their escape. Upon his return, Chin stood frozen in horror as the house was engulfed in a sea of flames, and he desperately cried out for help or water from the nearby stream. Realizing it might already be too late, he frantically broke down the door and charged into the inferno amidst the sound of crashing debris. Fallen beams blocked his path through the fire, leaving Chin to weep in despair while Ma Hyun watched the scene in horror, feeling helpless as he witnessed the tragedy unfold. Knowing he could not change the past within this vision, Ma Hyun watched as the forest turned to ash before a mysterious figure appeared holding the strange eye. A girl named Lisa, the same one from the water cellar, thanked the lost souls for the vision while the charred remains of the victims lay beneath the ashes. Using her mysterious powers, she miraculously restored the house to its former state and promised the fallen souls that she could bring them back to life. As their faces emerged from the soot, the two villains began to pray in gratitude, but Lisa stopped laughing and pointed to an iron cage, explaining that her help required pure souls in return. She commanded them to imprison the children, promising to restore the villains to life if the children grew to hate the world even more, prompting an angry outburst from Chin. Chin demanded to know who gave the monster permission to do this, but she simply placed a hand on his head and said she would also give the children a chance. Leaning toward Chin's ear, she whispered that if they killed the managers and burned them to ash, she would resurrect them first. She promises to make them happy, but Trio skeptically questions if it is truly possible and how they can trust her, to which she calmly responds. She warns that it will be painful but urges them to endure until her return, then smiles at Hyun, leaving him deeply confused. Hyun wonders why she is looking at him as their conflict continues like a game of tag, recalling her presence in the flooded basement. Convinced she is the same woman, he wonders what happened in that haunted house before Trio's shadow strikes him back into reality. Trio mocks Lee Hyun for fainting and warns that he would be dead if a monster found him, noting they were lucky the eye was destroyed. Trio asks for Hyun's help with a plan he has already devised, and then inquires if Chin has anything else to add. With a terrifyingly grim expression, Hyun vows to handle the monster, while Chio explains that the previous one was the younger manager. The older manager is much tougher, and the blonde-haired man watches in horror as the manager transforms into a monster. Facing the giant-mouthed creature, he recalls luring Hyun to the house and seeing the monster and the girl while near death in the basement. Realizing Lee Hyun is the key to the world hidden within these haunted houses, he wakes up feeling exhausted and in immense pain. Yi Sung wonders why he was imprisoned instead of killed and checks his bleeding body, realizing he is lucky to still be alive. He notices 4 children nearby who stare at him in disbelief, asking if he is truly alive and how he managed to enter this place. He asks if they are friends of the spiky-haired boy, and after a moment, the children begin to tell him their story. He learns that the managers on the first floor and basement must be burned to ash, as they become stronger and more horrific if the fire is extinguished. Yi Sung asks for the name of the woman who told them to burn the managers, and the children reply that her name might be Lisa. Yi Sung begins to tremble at the name as they discuss stabbing the heart, though a girl notes the younger manager only seems to fear fire. The girl claims that stabbing the heart is the way to escape and explains that she saw the woman again while fleeing from the manager. She describes the woman attaching a massive heart to the wall, leading Yi Sung to realize that this must be their way out. They must stab that heart, but first they need to escape the cell, at which point the children suddenly produce a key. Yi Sung is confused why they haven't left yet, but as he looks behind him, his expression turns to one of pure horror. Facing the massive, gaping maw of the monster, the children explain that this creature was once the manager, transformed after a failed cremation. The children warn that although the monster is blind, its hearing is incredibly sharp, and anyone caught will simply wake up back in this room after being eaten. While the children are already dead and safe from further harm, the blonde-haired man realizes his death would be permanent, yet he knows he cannot stay hidden forever. Suffering from blood loss and growing thirst, he understands that staying put is life-threatening, especially since he still has a mission to complete. Driven by the mention of Lisa's name, He pulls a weapon from his backpack and asks the children to lead him to the heart if they want to escape. He promises to handle the monster, while Cheon explains the strategy for dealing with the managers, emphasizing the importance of holding them firmly in place. Cheon explains that without being restrained, the manager will struggle and extinguish the flame, so they must lure it into a specific circle marked on the floor. Pointing to a hole hidden by black cloth on the ceiling, Cheon instructs him to drop a heavy weight from the second floor, much to the man's surprise. As they ascend to the second floor to survey the area, the boy gives careful instructions and promises to leave markings to help him navigate the path. Cheon reveals that the manager's weakness is their skin, making slashing more effective than stabbing, leading the man to wonder about the boy's combat experience. Reaching a small opening on the second floor, Cheon gestures for him to enter, and he uses his light to reveal what lies ahead. He discovers a large trap filled with sharp wooden stakes as Cheon produces a small whistle and explains the plan to lure the manager from below. The plan requires him to sever a rope with a single strike when the whistle blows, then immediately drop down to help restrain the manager. Preparing to face the manager, he tells Cheon to stay safe and extends his hand, a gesture that leaves the young boy feeling confused. He explains that the fist bump is a special gesture reserved for allies, encouraging the boy to stay safe and perform his role correctly. While Cheon goes to lure the target, Hyun waits on the second floor, mentally preparing himself to sever the rope the moment he hears the whistle. Taking a deep breath to steady his nerves, Hyun reacts instantly to the sound of the whistle and cuts the rope, triggering the trap with a heavy crash. He rushes forward with his axe to restrain the creature as planned, but he suddenly freezes in shock at the sight before him. Despite being riddled with stakes like a pincushion, the monster remains unfazed and glares at Hyun as if it intends to devour him whole. Recalling the warning to run toward the second circle if the plan failed, he watches in horror as the enraged monster charges toward him at full speed. Hyun narrowly escapes and begins the second phase of the plan, intending to lure the monster while searching for the second circle. The vastness of the area makes finding the location difficult, and even if he succeeds, someone must be ready to cut the rope. Without help, he will be forced to face the monster alone, so he urges Cheon to endure the hardship just a little longer. Despite being brutally beaten, Cheon forces himself to stand, determined to keep fighting no matter how many times he falls. Hyun has been running for over 30 minutes with the monster on his heels, his mouth tasting of blood as he searches for the circle. Though his body was already failing him, Hyun finally spots the second circle positioned directly ahead. Waiting above with his axe, Cheon grows anxious as the signal is delayed, fearing that Hyun might have been captured. When the signal finally comes, Cheon swings his axe but fails to cut the rope in one go, leaving Hyun confused as he runs. Realizing nothing has fallen and suspecting Cheon is too weak to cut the rope, Hyun prepares to confront the monster himself. Meanwhile, Goldhead's group escapes their cage and creeps through the hall, hoping the manager is still asleep in the basement. Their luck runs out when they find themselves standing directly in front of the manager's massive, gaping mouth. They attempt to move silently, but the mud on their shoes makes a noise that causes the creature to open its mouth wide. Goldhead quickly uses a remote-controlled car to distract the beast, carefully monitoring its movements through a camera. The distraction is short-lived as the monster swallows the toy, forcing Goldhead to scream for the children to run for their lives. The young girl leads them to a specific room, but they are dismayed to find that the heart is nowhere to be seen. She explains that her sister hid the heart inside the wall, leaving Goldhead feeling helpless and defeated. He laments trusting the children only to face death, certain that extracting a heart from a solid wall is an impossible task. Upon closer inspection, he notices strange marks on the wall and realizes the structure itself is the key to their goal. Goldhead remembers a man from his past claiming they were birthing a god in this place using the souls of pure children. He recalls a young Ji-sung crying and pleading with his mother as he was dragged away to participate in the ritual. Showing no emotion, the woman watches as the ritual is performed, and a blood-stained wooden sword pierces Dewey-sung's hand before he places it against the wall. Returning to the present, the blonde-haired man stands before the wall and intentionally injures himself, causing the room to shake as his blood-soaked hand makes contact. The children cry out in fear that the monster is breaking in, while Dewey-sung uses the mysterious symbols he drew on the wall to locate the heart. The heart calls out Dewey-sung's name as the monster outside is repelled from the wall, leading him to believe someone might still be alive inside. He shouts his intention to pull her out, but the entity inside the heart is actually a monster with a human head and a serpent's body that bears its sharp teeth. A single strike is powerful enough to pierce the wide-mouthed manager, while outside, Hyun feels the tremors and realizes they are not caused by an earthquake. Noticing the monster is within the circle, he calls out for Cheon to act, but nothing happens, leaving Cheon weeping as she desperately tries to saw through the rope above. She despairs over her failure and blames her own weakness as a child, while the monster finally begins to realize what is happening. The monster mocks their plan, realizing that if he steps into that spot, another sharp object will fall on him just as it did before. Cursing the young man, the monster throws a rapid punch that misses its mark, as Dewey Sung continues to move and calculate his next strategy. Hyun notices the creature is slowing down, and while it gains speed when enraged, its stamina is limited compared to his own. The massive size difference makes a direct victory nearly impossible, as a single punch could be fatal, especially given the monster's regenerative ability. Realizing he must lure the beast into the circle, Hyun begins to run again before charging straight toward its head. Choi Yi-seung strikes the manager's head with his axe, momentarily stunning it, but he is soon sent flying by a powerful counterpunch that leaves his vision blurred. He questions the purpose of the fight, recalling childhood training he once thought useless since it never helped him against ghosts, despite his mother's insistence. Driven by an impulse to help those in need, he focuses on his superior speed and stamina before attacking with the axe again, only to be knocked back once more. Hyun pauses to reflect on his true motivations for wanting to kill the monster, and whether there might be another way to escape this place. Despite his doubts about why he is going to such extremes, the monster becomes increasingly enraged, swearing to kill him regardless of his pure soul. Though he feels he has failed to save anyone, Hyun removes his bandages and prepares for a final, desperate charge against the creature. Gripping the axe with both hands, he strikes the monster's head with full force, viewing the blow as an act of revenge against the wicked. As the monster screams in pain, Hyun holds it firmly and pushes it toward the circle while shouting for the boy to cut the rope. From above, the young boy uses every ounce of his limited strength to desperately saw through the rope, praying for it to break. Hyun resorts to biting the monster to keep it pinned within the circle, while Chio finally manages to sever the rope using his own teeth. With a powerful kick, Hyun sends the monster reeling into the path of the falling trap, which pins the creature to the ground in agony. To ensure it cannot escape, Hyun uses wooden beams to secure the trap and jumps on them with all his weight, ignoring the monster's cry. Chio descends to pour gasoline over the trapped creature, ignoring its desperate pleas and promises to stop hunting him. The monster tries to bargain by suggesting they team up against the deceiver, but the boy coldly tells it to go to hell as he ignites the flame. A sudden tremor shakes the area as the space begins to contract, prompting the Hyun woman to call everyone to gather quickly. As the floor collapses, Chio falls toward a dark, seemingly bottomless abyss, bracing himself for a pain he feels he should no longer fear. Hyun suddenly lunges forward to shield the boy in his arms, prompting a frustrated and angry cry from Chio. He questions the reckless behavior, noting that while De is already gone, Mai is still human and could actually die, before gently comforting the child and reminding them that suffering is a burden for adults. No one remembers them or even knows they have vanished, as they feel smaller than dust and more fragile than a candle flame in the wind, living as pitiful souls. Having never been held by anyone before, Trio weeps in his arms to affirm their existence, experiencing a sense of warmth for the very first time. The two of them plummet downward and land right on the heart, destroying it and instantly defeating the snake-headed woman. The blonde-haired child asks about their mother only to learn she is dead, while Hyun realizes the place is collapsing and searches for an escape route. Hyun spots a small opening with light nearby and urges everyone to head toward it, carrying all 5 children by himself as they scramble to escape the crumbling ruin. With the light finally in sight, they manage to escape the cave as the children cry out in joy that they have truly made it outside. Their bodies begin to transform from black to a vibrant blue as they start to float into the air, leaving their dark forms behind. They notice another doorway ahead and head toward it, but Trio is unable to fly because his bag remains stained with darkness. Hyun reaches down and offers to take the bag so Trio can join the others, allowing the boy to finally cast aside his negative emotions and offer his thanks. After a final touch and a farewell, the children step through the door into a vibrant paradise where they can finally play and rest in peace. As the children finally find a home of their own, Yi-sung stands in stunned silence while Hyun hesitantly prepares to ask him a question. Yi-sung confusedly explains that the children vanished the moment they stepped outside, recalling how he watched Hyun crouching and talking to thin air. Under the moonlight, Yi-sung asks if the children departed safely, and he feels relieved when Hyun quietly confirms that they are fine. Standing outside the cave entrance, Hyun strikes a match and tosses it inside, watching as the flame flares up briefly in the darkness. The light slowly fades until it disappears completely, prompting a calm Yi-sung to observe that the flame has finally gone out. Hyun thoughtfully remarks that the disappearance is not surprising, while Yi-sung examines the dirt on his hands under a bright light with growing suspicion. Finding no physical injuries, he reflects on the recent events with a mind full of confusion over the inexplicable things he just witnessed. He recalls standing before the symbol and doing the only thing he could, which caused the heart to appear and the woman to emerge from within it. Yi-sung clenches his fist in frustration, wondering why she turned into a snake, but remains determined that he has finally found a way to succeed next time. Hyun warms up his body and interrupts Yi-seung's thoughts, noting that everything has healed perfectly just like at the previous abandoned house. Looking toward him, Hyun recalls that Yi-seung once mentioned breaking 5 ribs and asks why he was the only one who did not heal that time. Yi-seung avoids the question and searches the area until he happily finds some crumpled food packages, prompting a suspicious look from Hyun. Yi-seung explains that he often buys snacks when visiting tragic sites like abandoned houses, lighting a stick of incense as he sets the food down. After planting the incense in the ground, Yi-seung describes this as his personal way of honoring the dead and praying they find a better place. Hyun sighs and sits on the ground, declaring he will never return to such places, as the scene shifts to a girl sitting calmly atop a massive monster. A monster pinned underfoot begs Lessa for mercy, but she ignores its pleas and stares coldly into the distance. While blowing a bubble with her gum, Lessa expresses her irritation that the souls she intended to take were snatched away right before her eye. Her bubble suddenly pops, and the monster pinned beneath her feet vanishes instantly. As the monster's scream echoes, Lessa smiles and mocks the creatures, wondering why her powers work so easily on them but have no effect on Hyun. Another monster wails and begs Lessa for its life, promising to do whatever she commands. Lessa laughs mockingly and tells the creatures that filthy souls like theirs have no reason to exist in her world. In a vibrant setting, Hyun reflects on how Choi Yi-seung likely went to the abandoned house alone to avoid pressuring him further. Hyun wonders if Yi-seung actually possesses a conscience while he bends down to adjust his shoe. Hyun answers a phone call from his mother, who is out walking their dog Gurium, and chats with her as he continues on his way. He tells her he has no evening classes and agrees to meet her later, walking through the falling autumn leaves while lost in thought. He hopes the children reached a better place and wonders if Lessa is a monster or a ghost, concluding she is a devil for toying with their soul. He hopes to never encounter her again and vows to stop being meddlesome, but he soon notices a man handing out flyers flanked by 2 eerie figures. Realizing the figures are ghosts, Hyun cries out as they lunge at him, while the man hands him a missing person flyer for someone named Lee Yeezy. Hyun looks at the flyer with growing suspicion as the girl's exhausted father trembles and asks him to call if he has any information. Hyun stops himself from speaking harshly and hesitantly agrees as the man departs, followed by 2 ghosts who plead with him in vain. A dark shadow looms behind Hyun as he tries to ignore the meddling ghost standing nearby. The spirit only fixates on events involving the living, and Hyun's grip tightens on a piece of paper until it wrinkles. Snapped out of his thoughts by a barking dog and his mother's voice, Hyun rushes over to ask why Gurium is acting so strangely. Hyun looks toward a man and apologizes, explaining that his dog does not usually behave this way. The man is enveloped in a thick, murky darkness, and Gurium barks incessantly at the gloomy figure as a cold wind brushes past Hyun. Hyun becomes lost in thought, relying on his keen sensitivity and his ability to remember voices he has heard before. Reaching out to the man with a smile, Hyun touches the surrounding darkness and sees various faces pleading for help, causing him to recognize the voice. Realizing the spiritual mass belongs to Gurium's former owner, Hyun watches as the gray-haired man returns to normal and cheerfully claims he is fine. Hyun sighs in relief, just as 2 female students run up to the man and excitedly call out to their teacher. As the 3 of them head into a store, Hyun's mother looks at him with concern and asks what is wrong. Hyun tells his mother it is nothing and suggests they go home, while the 2 ghosts following Yeji's father watch them from the side of the road. The ghosts watch silently as the scene shifts to the gray-haired man finishing his lesson and dismissing his class. When a student invites him to eat spicy rice cakes, the teacher declines, explaining that he has to go feed his cat. The student teases him about his cute hobby before the scene changes to the man driving through traffic. He focuses silently on the road until a twisted smile spreads across his face as he prepares to open a door. The gray-haired man stands at the entrance with a bizarre grin, looking at the female student he has imprisoned as she begs for mercy. Outside Hyun's home, the two ghosts following Yeji's father stand on the balcony and beg Hyun to save the girl. Hyun pauses mid-meal, realizing the name Yeji sounds familiar as the image of her father flashes through his mind. Remembering the missing person flyer for 17-year-old Lee Yeji, Hyun quickly reaches for the crumpled paper in his bag. Hyun holds up the paper to the two ghosts and asks if this is the person they mean, prompting the female ghost to celebrate their choice. The male ghost is shocked that Hyun can see them, while Hyun sighs in frustration, feeling helpless and confused about the situation. Hyun suddenly asks about Lee Yeji's current status and demands to know the true identity of the two spirits. After composing themselves, the male ghost explains that they were both murdered by the gray-haired man Hyun encountered earlier. The male ghost recalls being tortured and begging for mercy, while the gray-haired man recorded the entire ordeal on camera. The killer films the scene and praises the victim's expression before picking up a blood-stained wrench from the floor. The killer excitedly prepares to continue as the victim groans, while the male ghost remembers the moment his pain finally vanished. He suddenly saw his own corpse and the gray-haired man expressing disappointment over the death before the two ghosts noticed each other. The female ghost wept and apologized for her helplessness as the male ghost's narration brought back these painful memories. They began following the killer and witnessed another murder where the victim was dragged into a soundproof basement. The basement leads to a soundproof storage room where a bound and desperate Yeji sits coughing on a chair. Staring at her reflection, Yeji wonders how long she has been trapped and breaks down, sobbing for someone to save her. Hearing a wiping sound, she looks up to see a message written in the condensation on the mirror telling her to escape at any cost. Terrified by the mysterious writing, she screams in fear and realizes that ghosts must be present in the room with her. The message on the mirror changes to tell her not to be afraid because they were once human, causing Yeji to tremble and ask if she is also going to die. The message changes to say her father is looking for her, causing Yeji to sob and beg the spirits to tell him her location. The ghosts look at each other sadly, as the male ghost explains that they are completely powerless outside of the basement and storage room. They followed Hyun as a last resort because he had made eye contact with them, but Hyun insists he can only report the matter to the police. The female ghost explains she has followed the killer for a year without her body being found, and warns that he is far too cautious for the police. She warns that an investigation would force the killer to eliminate Yeji, prompting Hyun to ask what would happen if he were killed too. The female ghost weeps as she apologizes, claiming she has no other choice, while Hyun grinds his teeth in frustration. Haunted by the image of Yeji's father, Yeji wonders why the man's face continues to linger in his mind. After a moment of inner conflict, Hyun asks for the location, and the ghost offers to lead the way since she cannot recall the address. The male ghost warns him to be cautious as Hyun puts on his coat, mentioning his connection to a police officer. Intending to report the address and then withdraw, Hyun cycles quickly while calling Officer Jang Seok. Jang Seok shouts irritably over the phone, but Hyun stands his ground and asks if he remembers the missing student, Lee Yeji. When the officer claims he cannot remember every case, an agitated Hyun identifies the victim as 17-year-old Lee Yeji. Hyun warns that she is being held hostage by a madman and will die unless he sends the address, prompting Jang Seok to yell at him to stay away. Jang Seok warns that a cornered suspect might kill the girl to destroy evidence, but Hyun insists that is exactly why the police must act. Hyun pleads for a swift arrest, revealing that the suspect has already murdered 3 people, leaving Jang Seok in shock. As Hyun prepares to disclose the locations of the bodies, Jang Seok urgently asks his colleagues for a pen and paper. Relaying the ghost's information, Hyun identifies the first victim as Lim Mi-yang, buried on a mountain near Gangpo Port. The second victim, Kim Min-seok, is hidden in 2 suitcases between large rocks at the dry Jiangsu stream. Hyun explains that the third victim is the former owner of Guryong, whose dismembered body the officer had previously encountered. Stunned by the revelation, Jang Seok quickly regains his composure and orders his team to prepare for an overnight operation. After his team acknowledges the order, the officer sternly warns Hyun to stay put and avoid taking any further action. Upon reaching the destination, the female ghost points out the house, and Hyun takes a photograph while considering his next move. Noticing the house is locked, he decides to send the address to the officer first before determining how to proceed. As Hyun reads out the address on Bupyeong Boulevard, the gray-haired man approaches from behind and raises a brick. Following the sound of a shattering brick, Hyun eventually wakes up in the basement where another captive is being held. Hyun is restrained and forced to sit across from Yi-jae, causing him to panic as a curly-haired man leaning back in a chair notices he has regained consciousness. The man smiles while holding a camera and places a hand on Yi-jae's shoulder, asking if Hyun is her boyfriend as she shakes her head in denial. Turning his attention back to his victim, the man laughs with sadistic pleasure and holds up his camera to praise Hyun's terrified expression. He captures the moments of fear, describing with delight the sight of trembling bodies, heavy breathing, and eyes filled with absolute terror. After pinning the new photo to a board filled with similar trophies, the man boasts about how lovely everyone looks through his lens. Explaining that this thrill is his motivation, he immediately presses a cloth soaked in a toxic substance over Yi-jae's mouth, ignoring her struggle. As Hyun watches in horror, the man removes the cloth and declares that Yi-jae will become a masterpiece more beautiful than any of his previous victims. The psychopath grabs Hyun's hair and reveals that he had not intended to kill Yi-jae so quickly, blaming Hyun for the change in plans. The man carries the unconscious girl away while Hyun struggles desperately to move, though his chair remains firmly fixed to the floor. Determined to save her, Hyun exerts so much force that the chair legs finally break free from the adhesive, sending him sliding across the floor. Lying face down, he manages to blow the tape off his mouth and gasps for air, before shouting that Yi-jae is in grave danger. He urges the spirits to find a way out, but they inform him that the room is completely sealed and locked from the outside. Realizing there are no windows and that no sound can escape the room, Hyun closes his eyes and tries to think of a solution. The female ghost tearfully apologizes for failing to warn him, while the male ghost remains panicked and unsure of how to help. In the midst of the crisis, Hyun suddenly recalls a vital piece of information from when the group had been separated. He remembers that Choi Yi-sung had continued alone to the abandoned houses, filming himself and greeting his audience for a broadcast. Yi-sung announces his arrival at an abandoned church in the Bukda district, a sight that makes Hyun sigh despite the dire circumstances. Unaware of the situation, Yi-sung continues to interact with his camera and ghost hunting equipment during what is actually a recorded session. Realizing Yi-sung is his only hope, Hyun shouts for help and prays that someone will see the footage and come to his rescue. Still bound to the chair, Hyun instructs the two ghosts to go and find the abandoned church located in the Bukda district. Two ghosts fly through the night sky, circling continuously as they search for a tall man with brown hair wandering around with a flashlight. Finding it difficult to see clearly in the open, the male ghost suggests searching quieter areas while recalling Hyun's description of the man and his strange equipment. They remember to tell him Lee Hyun is in danger and needs rescue just as they spot Yi-sung below, struggling with his camera flash and wondering why his ghost bait has failed. Despite his equipment remaining silent, an ear-piercing static noise suddenly erupts from his backpack before fading into a steady beat, leaving Yi-sung completely stunned. He pulls the only active device from his bag and holds the Sanma radio in disbelief, wondering if someone is trying to communicate with him. The radio crackles as a faint voice whispers Lee Hyun's name, leaving Hyun-sung feeling deeply unsettled by the mention of his friend. He quickly tries to call Hyun only to find the phone unreachable, but the radio speaks again, urging him to come quickly and save someone. Armed with this information, he jumps onto his motorcycle and speeds off, convinced that Lee Hyun's ghost sent the message while he plugs an earpiece into the device. As Yi-sung accelerates to full speed and shouts to ask for the location, the ghosts guide him to turn right, and he immediately follows their direction. Filled with worry and hoping for Lee Hyun's safety, he reaches the dark alley where the ambush occurred but remains uncertain if he has found the right spot. Finding the area silent and the entrance locked, Yi-sung lets out a heavy breath before gripping the handlebars tightly and revving his engine. Determined to save his friend who is calling for help, Yi-sung shouts out that he no longer cares about the obstacles and charges forward without fear. He recklessly crashes through the door, shattering it into pieces before drifting inside to find Lee Hyun, who has been lying there for a long time wondering how much time has passed. Lee Hyun is completely shocked by the deafening noise while Yi-sung removes his helmet and looks around cheerfully, though he initially fails to spot his friend. Following the signals from the ghosts transmitted through his device, Yi-sung approaches a corner and kicks the boxes aside to see if they were hiding something. After the foam boxes are cleared to reveal a hidden door, Yi-sung rushes down with a brick in hand and finally reunites with a stunned Lee Hyun. As Chapter 20 begins, Yi-sung quickly unties his friend and suggests going to the hospital, but Lee Hyun ignores the suggestion entirely. Wiping himself off, Lee Hyun insists they must leave immediately to catch the madman, noting that the only way out is across a single wooden plank. Lee Hyun stands frozen in shock at the destruction of their only exit while Yi-sung, unaware of the gravity of the situation, simply laughs it off. Since there was no key to the door, they proceed through a passage that leads to an entirely unfamiliar area, leaving Lee Hyun feeling very surprised. Hyun is baffled to find a second basement level and suggests they head back up, questioning the bizarre layout while Yi-sung nonchalantly agrees. Before he can process the shock, Hyun is stunned to see the rest of the place is also trash, with Yi-sung offering the weak excuse that he lacked a key. The basement was only the beginning, as the upper floor features a massive hole where Yi-sung drove his car through the wall, leaving debris scattered everywhere. Hyun panics over the repair costs exceeding the insurance, but Yi-sung laughs it off with the same excuse before tossing a phone to Hyun and urging him to move. Ready to go, Yi-sung tells Hyun to hop on the bike to catch the killer after the ghosts of a man and woman reveal the location is Gyudon Village. Yi-sung revs the engine and speeds off toward Gyudon Village before Hyun can even secure his helmet, with Hyun shouting for them to depart. Still fuming over the insults from the curly-haired man, Hyun vows to crush his skull while sitting behind Yi-sung and giving him direction. Hyun is frustrated by the nearly dead battery, but Yi-sung reminds him it is better than nothing since Hyun lost his own phone. Hyun hurriedly dials a number, hoping the police will believe him before the phone dies, and begins shouting the moment the call connects. He informs the police that the missing Lee Yi-jae has been kidnapped by a serial killer and identifies himself as the informant. Warning that she will be killed, he tells them to check a restaurant in Rongwon for proof before giving directions to an abandoned warehouse in Gyudon Village. He explains that the serial killer is holding her there and demands they go immediately, leaving the startled officer asking him to speak more slowly. With the battery failing, Hyun identifies himself and tells them to contact investigator Kim Jong-seok, insisting this is no joke before the phone shuts off. Drenched in sweat and hoping his message was understood, Hyun sits back as Yi-sung finally begins to process the gravity of the situation. Yi-sung realizes that Hyun was kidnapped while trying to save the girl and that they are now following the directions of ghosts. When Yi-sung asks for confirmation that they are heading toward a serial killer, Hyun looks him in the eye and firmly agrees. Yi-sung panics at the thought of facing a murderer, but Hyun cannot ignore the fact that a human life is at stake. Hyun feels a deep sense of responsibility, knowing that if the police fail to act, the girl will die because of his inability to save her earlier. When Yi-sung asks if he even knows the victim, Hyun bluntly admits he does not, leaving Yi-sung completely baffled by his friend's recklessness. Yi-sung can only conclude that Hyun is truly insane as they arrive at the designated tree under the moonlight and step off the motorcycle. After confirming the location of the large ginkgo tree, a restless Lee Hyun begins the climb up the northern mountain. He charges ahead without a word, prompting Ji-sung to shout a warning for him to slow down due to his head injury. Ignoring the advice, Hyun accelerates while briefly stopping to confirm with the spirits that the path leads straight up. Both male and female spirits confirm the way and warn him to be careful, leaving Ji-sung stunned that the ghosts are still following. Meanwhile, the curly-haired predator prepares his equipment, including cameras and a car repair kit filled with hammers and screwdrivers. The man violently rips the tape from Yi-jae's mouth, leaving her to sob in a state of utter helplessness and despair. He leans in close to mock her injury before brandishing a wrench, causing the terrified girl to beg her teacher for mercy. Yi-jae pleads for her life for the sake of her single father, but her desperate cries only seem to amuse the sadistic man. He toys with her by dangling the wrench over her, and just as he prepares to strike, a sudden shout interrupts him. The killer turns toward the voice just as Hyun leaps forward to deliver a powerful kick while hurling an insult. Ji-sung watches in a panic, wondering why two high school students are hunting a killer alone and fearing for his reckless friend. Realizing Hyun would have done the same for him, Ji-sung shouts for him to stop, knowing they are no match for the criminal. Overwhelmed by fear, he cannot fathom how Hyun intends to face a murderer armed with nothing more than a stone. He struggles to understand why Hyun would risk his life for a stranger, as the killer is knocked to the ground by the blow. The attack only enrages the man, who draws a hidden dagger and prepares to strike back at the boy who has cornered himself. Paralyzed by the sight of the blade, Hyun is unable to move until Ji-sung instinctively throws himself in front of the killer's strike. Ji-sung takes a direct slash to the face, leaving Hyun standing in a state of shock as he calls out his friend's name. After initially clutching his face, Ji-sung reveals a deep, gruesome wound that is heavily saturated with blood. Having endured their own horrors, the ghosts prioritized saving the girl from a similar fate over Lee Hyun's personal safety. As Hyun trembles with the fear of causing another's death, the killer laughs manically and tells him that everything is his fault. Lee Hyun loses his composure as Yi-sung charges into the chaos, both of them suffering the consequences of their overconfidence. Hyun stands frozen in shock after witnessing the curly-haired man slash a deep wound across Yi-sung's face. Despite the injury, Yi-sung remains indifferent to the pain, covering his face and coldly insisting they deal with their opponent first. The curly-haired man suddenly drops his knife and turns away with a smile, prompting Yi-sung to shout at Hyun for picking up the discarded weapon. Hyun silently hands the knife to Yi-sung before grabbing a hammer from a nearby toolbox, believing the weapon will give them an advantage. Their confidence quickly vanishes when the curly-haired man lets out a soft sound, leaving both Hyun and Yi-sung completely stunned. Now wielding a chainsaw and grinning like an innocent child, the madman asks who will be first as he revs the engine. The man swings the chainsaw at Hyun, who narrowly avoids the blade before rushing back to Yi-sung to speak with urgency. Choi Yi-sung attempts to lead the girl away, but the curly-haired man refuses to let them go easily, turning back with a cold and furious glare. The man suddenly freezes at a strange sound from behind and lets out a piercing scream, while Yi-sung reaches the bound girl and begins cutting her ropes. Yi-sung reassures the girl that none of this is her fault as he uses the knife Hyun provided to free Yi-jae from her restraints. He instructs her to head down the mountain to alert the police of the danger, and Yi-jae tearfully nods, gathering her strength to follow his lead. Yi-sung urges her to run as fast as she can to ensure she reaches the foot of the mountain safely and secures reinforcements from the police. The curly-haired man mockingly questions where Yi-jae is going, but Hyun quickly draws his focus back by demanding that the villain face him instead. The man swings his chainsaw, forcing Hyun to retreat in a panic as he narrowly avoids being struck by the lethal blade. Noticing the fear on Hyun's face, the man smirks with contempt, relishing how close he came to cutting his opponent in two. Yi-sung realizes they cannot survive a direct confrontation with the chainsaw and desperately searches for a way to turn the tide of the battle. As Yi-sung formulates a plan, Hyun is forced to drop his hammer and clutch his injured left arm in pain. The curly-haired man laughs maniacally at Hyun's misfortune, taunting him for losing his weapon and challenging him to defend himself empty-handed. Despite his heavy breathing and injury, Hyun remains defiant, which only serves to heighten the man's twisted and frenzied excitement. The man prepares to swing his chainsaw again, but Yi-sung suddenly hurls a chain that entangles the blade and brings the weapon to a halt. Taking advantage of the opening, Hyun lunges forward with a clenched fist and delivers a powerful blow to the curly-haired man. Meanwhile, Yi-jae continues her desperate flight down the mountain through her tears, but she eventually trips and falls hard onto the ground. In her pain, she cries out for help and wonders about the identity of the mysterious young man who risked everything to save her. Determined to return the favor and save her rescuers, she finds a new surge of strength and screams as loudly as she can for assistance. She prays for the police to find her while Detective Jang Seok and his team urgently coordinate their search near the northern mountain pass. Yi-jae eventually reaches the detective and collapses from exhaustion, her knees bloodied as she weakly begs him to save her friend. Before he can even finish his phone call, Detective Jang Seok is stunned by the girl's battered appearance and listens as she pleads for help. Lee Yeji tearfully confirms her identity and begs for the rescue of the boys on the mountain, fearing for their lives. Her words heighten the man's panic, while Hyun and Yi-sung appear to have subdued the curly-haired man on the mountain. As the man lies curled on the ground like an insect, a wounded but capable Hyun tells Yi-sung that they have won. Yi-sung suggests tying the man up, and after finding rope, they discuss binding the girl as well. Finding an abundance of rope, they joke about the man being a smuggler and prepare to tie his hands and feet separately. Suddenly, the curly-haired man splashes a liquid into their eyes, leaving them weakened and confused about what has happened. The man then pours more of the liquid onto a cloth and presses it firmly against Hyun's nose. Hyun is paralyzed with fear as the man lies back and laughs, mocking them for their perceived stupidity. Claiming they will be unable to move, the man grabs a wrench and stands unsteadily, threatening to gouge out their eyes. Deciding to pull out their tongues first for their insolence, the man approaches Hyun to begin his assault. As Hyun loses his senses and the wrench is forced into his mouth, blood begins to drip from the curly-haired man instead. Blood streams from the man's face as he freezes, surrounded by ghosts who whisper their intent to kill him. The ghosts tighten their grip on the man's throat, drowning out his weak groans with their relentless death threats. Hyun regains consciousness and weakly urges the ghosts to stop, warning that such actions will lead them to hell. Unable to see the spirits or call for help, the man suffers in silence, feeling suffocated and desperate for rescue. Clutching his neck, the man runs blindly until he encounters Yang Seok and stares at him in absolute horror. He perceives Yang Seok as a horned demon with sharp teeth and sunken eyes, who addresses him directly. The man screams and flees, but Yang Seok chases him down and grabs his clothing, demanding that he stop. Despite the warning of danger, the man kicks Yang Seok in a panic and falls over the cliff after rejecting his protection. At the hospital, a somber Yang Seok waits as a companion asks if their situation has become completely hopeless. Yang Seok bows his head in somber silence, telling the man to be quiet as the fall was not fatal, just before the emergency doctor arrives with a calm update. The doctor reports that while the patient survived, a cervical spine injury has left him completely paralyzed, causing the person nearby to sigh in disappointment. Continuing the update on the curly-haired man, the doctor explains that his sensitivity to pain indicates significant nerve damage. Despite receiving painkillers, the patient remains in agony on his bed, his eyes wide with terror as he watches ghosts surround him. The spirits grin eerily while stabbing him with knives, leaving him to weep in silence as he desperately pleads for death in his mind. Inside Hyun's hospital room, Officer Kim Jong-seok introduces himself to the woman who had contacted the police. Recognizing her as Hyun's mother, the officer offers his business card and encourages her to reach out if any further issues arise. Hyun wakes up in a weakened state and calls out to his mother and the officer, prompting his mother to turn toward him with a look of startled concern. While Yi-sung stares silently at the ceiling in the adjacent bed, Hyun's mother allows her worry to turn into anger as she scolds her son for his reckless behavior. Frightened by his mother's sudden outburst, Hyun offers a timid apology, leaving her to turn away in a state of helpless frustration. After telling Hyun they will speak later, his mother steps aside for the officer, who looks the boy in the eye and speaks with a raised voice. The officer remarks on how dangerous the situation was before closing his eyes and adopting a much more somber expression. He reminds Hyun that everyone involved nearly lost their lives and warns him to be more cautious so that such an event never happens again. Suddenly remembering the girl, Hyun asks about Lee Yeji's condition, causing Jong-seok to shout in exasperation before providing an update. Jong-seok explains that despite being malnourished and having a minor knee injury, Yeji has been safely reunited with her father thanks to Hyun's intervention. Yeji sits on her hospital bed and sobs like a child as she and her father share an emotional embrace. As the father and daughter weep with relief over her rescue, Jong-seok bows his head and expresses deep regret for his late arrival. Hyun is surprised by the officer's apology and insists it was his own fault for not explaining things clearly before asking about the culprit. Jong-seok decides to bypass protocol and informs Hyun that the perpetrator has been left completely paralyzed. Hyun feels a sense of unease at the news and wonders about the spirits, just as he notices two ghosts waving to him from the window. Noticing Hyun has seen her, the ghost in the yellow dress points upward to signal that they should meet on the rooftop. Hyun smiles and prepares to leave his bed for the meeting, but Yang-seok, unaware of the situation, offers a worried warning. Yang-seok tells Hyun to stay in the room to avoid a police investigation, and Hyun quickly agrees and bids him farewell so he will leave. Hyun gets out of bed and tells Yi-sung to stop pretending to be asleep and come outside for some fresh air. Yi-sung opens his eyes, looking pale and weak with a bandaged facial wound, realizing he could not fool Hyun. The two head to the rooftop where the ghosts are waiting, and Hyun rushes forward, relieved to see they are both safe. Hyun expresses his relief that they are safe, and the male ghost smiles, noting that their attacker will surely face his due punishment. Unlike her companion, the female ghost in yellow laughs loudly, while mockingly describing the curly-haired man's pathetic state. She remarks on how foolish the man looked while hallucinating, and the male ghost adds that he feels much more at peace thanks to Hyun. As the darkness surrounding their souls begins to dissipate, the female ghost stops laughing and offers a gentle, sincere smile. The female ghost says she will let go of everything and leave, offering her apologies and thanks before both spirits vanish into bright light. Yi-sung asks if it is over and if those were the spirits that had guided him earlier, to which Hyun softly confirms they have moved on. Yi-sung leans against the railing and remarks on how difficult and incomprehensible the world Hyun perceives must be. When Yi-sung asks if he was brought up there just to witness that, Hyun looks at him with a somber expression filled with regret. Hyun apologizes for the scar that will likely remain on Yi-sung's face, but Yi-sung only responds with a silent, gentle smile. Yi-sung then grins and suggests that if Hyun feels guilty, he should join him at a haunted house, prompting Hyun to call him crazy. Hyun remains confused by the request and asks why Yi-sung is so obsessed with visiting such abandoned location. Yi-sung looks Hyun in the eye and calmly explains that his mother is trapped in such a place, leaving Hyun completely stunned. Hyun asks in shock where she is trapped, while Yi-sung gazes at the cloudy sky and begins to calmly recount his story. He explains that as a child, he entered a shifting space like the abandoned school where his mother vanished, and he now searches abandoned houses to find her. He reflects on how he had visited numerous haunted locations in the past without incident, then remembers his own extraordinary abilities. Turning to look at the pensive young man, he remarks that everything has changed since they began traveling together. With dimensions shifting and monsters appearing, he suspects many such strange places exist and that his mother might be trapped in one of them. Believing the boy is the key to these transformations, he asks him to accompany him to the entrance one last time while he ventures inside alone. He mentions needing to attempt something, prompting Hyun to look up and sigh deeply while they stand in silence until Huang speaks up. Huang accuses him of playing tricks again, and as night falls, a girl's hand appears to gently caress the sleeping Hyun's cheek. It is Lisa, who gazes adoringly at his peaceful face and softly whispers for Hyun to come away with her as chapter 23 begins. Beneath the canopy of tall green trees, Hyun slowly wakes as sunlight filters into his eyes, finding Lisa standing right before him. Seeing him awake, she smiles warmly, having let him sleep with his head in her lap under a large tree, a realization that startles him. Hyun immediately snaps into full alertness and sits up, staring at the girl with wide eyes as he demands to know what kind of creature she is. Unfazed by his reaction, Lisa remains calm and gently asks Hyun if he truly fails to recognize who she is. His initial panic fades into a groggy confusion as he wonders aloud how he got there and where they currently are. Questioning if this is a dream, his expression turns to anger as he coldly accuses her of playing tricks and tells her to stop acting so familiar. Hyun stands up and walks away barefoot with cold determination, stating that he is fully aware of what she did to the children. Lisa's smile vanishes, replaced by a frantic sense of guilt as she claims it was a misunderstanding, though her excuses only fuel his growing rage. Showing his undisguised hatred, he glares at her and calls her a demon, demanding she stay out of his dreams and leave him alone forever. After speaking his mind, Hyun turns away and wonders where he is, frustrated by the bizarre nature of his recent dream. Before he can process his thoughts, Lisa grabs his arm firmly and desperately begs him to listen to what she has to say. On the verge of tears and visibly panicked, she implores Hyun to go with her, warning him that he will be in grave danger if he refuses. Without a moment of hesitation, he violently jerks his arm away and casts a cold, murderous glare in her direction. Hyun demands that she let go and questions her humanity, causing Lisa's eyes to well up with tears. Tears stream down Lisa's face as she stands frozen in grief, wondering how Hyun could speak to her that way. Despite her uncontrollable sobbing, she screams at him in a fit of helpless frustration because he refuses to listen. Lisa warns him that he will regret having to fend for himself before Hyun suddenly wakes up gasping for air. Hyun looks around the unfamiliar hospital room in confusion, sensing that something strange is happening to him. Realizing he is no longer in his original hospital, Hyun wonders about his location as a sharp pain shoots through his right arm. He discovers the number 3 carved into his skin and realizes this is no dream just as he notices an eye staring at him. Startled by the gaze, Hyun leaps out of bed to pursue the mysterious eye, remembering that he has encountered it once before. He tries to catch the entity, but it moves too quickly and escapes through a window before he can reach it. Looking outside to track its direction, he is met with a terrifying, absolute darkness where nothing else is visible. Feeling overwhelmed by the void, he retreats into the room and concludes that Lisa must be responsible for his predicament. Hyun composes himself, noting that the environment resembles the abandoned school and likely harbors dangerous monsters. While searching for a weapon, Hyun is stunned to find a functional axe and a flashlight inside a storage cabinet. Impressed by the quality of his starting equipment, he also finds a coin and decides to keep it just in case it becomes useful. After pocketing the coin, he cautiously checks the long, empty hallway and prepares himself to move forward with extreme care. Hyun steps out and activates his flashlight, slowly making his way down the corridor in search of an exit. He reaches a door that appears to be an exit, but it remains stubbornly shut despite his best efforts to force it open. Frustrated by the locked door, he realizes he must find a key, a crowbar, or some other tool to bypass the obstruction. Hyun decides to search the nurse's station first, navigating the dark and cluttered room entirely on his own. After a thorough search, he finds only a battery and 2 more coins, leaving him puzzled but determined to continue. With only 1 battery and 2 coins, Hyun replaces the battery to fix his flashlight and wonders if any doors require coins, feeling prepared with the one he found earlier. Leaving the infirmary, he traverses a long, dark corridor where most rooms are locked, occasionally finding coins and batteries on the floor or chairs. After collecting a total of 3 batteries and 1 coin along the hallway, he reaches the very end of the corridor and his expression shifts to one of pure surprise. He is startled to find a vending machine emitting an alluring glow and notices that there is a key kept inside of it. His wonder quickly turns to cold disappointment when he realizes the machine requires 10 coins to dispense the item he needs. Hyun stares blankly in silence, contemplating the fact that he must insert coins into the machine to obtain the key. He raises his axe with a fixed gaze and, struck by a sudden realization, delivers a powerful blow to the vending machine. Since the surface is not made of reinforced glass, the machine is unable to withstand the force of Hyun's heavy strike. The glass shatters into pieces, allowing him to easily retrieve the key while feeling a mix of joy and suspicion at how simple the task turned out to be. His relief is short-lived as he turns around to see a massive, 8-legged monster crawling toward him through the darkness, illuminated only by the light from the machine. The creature lacks a face, possessing only a gaping, hole-like mouth with a long tongue, yet despite his internal panic, Hyun maintains his resolve to defend himself. He lets out a long scream and lunges forward with his axe, but before he can strike, the monster's long tongue pierces through his body and lifts him high into the air. The axe falls from his hand as he coughs up blood in agony, only to suddenly wake up back at the very beginning of the space where he first entered. Although his wounds have vanished, the lingering sensation of sharp pain leaves Hyun gasping in terror, his face appearing significantly more gaunt and exhausted. He groans as a familiar sensation returns to his right arm, and upon checking, he sees that the number 3 has been replaced by a number 2. Hyun panics at the sight of the changing number, fearing it represents his remaining lives, and feels even more distressed when he finds the spot where he was impaled has completely healed. He realizes the excruciating pain was far too real to be a dream, and that there are genuine monsters roaming freely outside. His hands tremble as he realizes his equipment is gone, finding only a battery and a coin in his pocket while wondering what happened to his axe, flashlight, and key. He deduces that only items in his pockets remain while anything held in his hands is lost, perhaps left at the site of his death, making him feel as though he is trapped in a game. Feeling completely unsafe, Hyun suspects that Lessa is orchestrating everything and taking pleasure in watching his desperate struggle. Hyun's fear is quickly overtaken by a surge of intense anger and hatred toward Lessa, causing a cold, murderous aura to emanate from him. He resolves to make the game boring for his tormentor, vowing that despite having only 2 lives left, he will not allow himself to die again. Determined to escape and leave Lessa aboard, Hyun stands in silence for a long time until a sudden noise from outside catches his attention. His heart wavers momentarily, though he tells himself it is just lingering pain from his previous fatal wound as the clattering sounds draw closer. A glass cup falls from a shelf and shatters before him just as the monster comes charging into the room. Hyun quickly crouches down and covers his mouth to stay silent, while the creature crawls around before stopping directly in front of him with its massive maw. He stares wide-eyed and remains perfectly still, the 2 of them frozen in place like a scene from a movie that has been paused. The creature's long tongue suddenly lashes out and narrowly misses his face, and since it lacks eyes, it eventually leaves the room, leaving a gasping Hyun behind. Trembling from the close call, Hyun curses his situation and clenches his fists, forcing himself to regain his composure and focus on survival. He realizes the monster is blind and has no sense of smell, but it is incredibly fast and possesses an acute sense of hearing. Concluding that silence is his best defense, Hyun cautiously creeps out of the room and heads back toward the vending machine. He is not surprised to find his previously dropped equipment still scattered on the floor exactly where he left it. Seeing his own fresh blood on the floor fills him with a sense of dread, but he pushes the feeling aside and approaches the locked door with his key. The key works and the door unlocks, prompting Hyun to look back with a triumphant smirk as he silently mocks his pursuer. Despite his success, the door is incredibly heavy and only opens a crack, leaving Hyun panicked as he struggles to force it wide enough to pass through. The heavy door creaks loudly as he struggles with it, and the resulting noise immediately draws the attention of the monster. Realizing the creature is closing in, Hyun abandons the door and retreats into the infirmary, hiding under a table to evade the hunt. While hiding in silence, he grits his teeth in frustration, cursing the heavy, noisy door that hindered his escape. Wondering how anyone is expected to get through that door, Hyun considers finding another exit as he notices the monster moving toward the left hallway. Seeing an opportunity to check the right hallway, Hyun stands up and grabs several test tubes from a nearby table before moving out. Hyun tells himself to find something to throw to create a distraction, just in case. However, he forgets his own persistent bad luck and trips over a stray wheel on the floor. He falls face first as the test tubes shatter loudly against the hard tile, and he finds himself unable to stay quiet. Realizing the monster must have heard the noise and is approaching, a panicked Hyun grabs his axe and flashlight to find a place to hide, but every room is locked. He tries to stand perfectly still, but it is too late as he grips his axe, drenched in sweat and involuntary tears. Despite his efforts to remain undetected, the monster stands before him and lashes its long tongue out, which Hyun barely blocks with his axe. The monster intensifies its attack, but accidentally stabs its tongue into the wall, allowing Hyun to grab the limb and mock the creature's helplessness. After hacking off the tongue, Hyun gasps for air and prepares to flee as he watches the appendage begin to regenerate. Terrified by the sight of the monster's rapid recovery, Hyun realizes that fighting is futile and immediately turns to run. Reaching the end of the hallway, he finds a gurney and kicks it with all his might toward the monster while cursing at it to stay away. As he continues to run, he searches for anything useful and notices that some lights are still functioning, indicating the presence of electricity. Without hesitation, Hyun strikes the fire alarm, causing a deafening ringing to echo throughout the entire hallway. The overwhelming noise causes the monster to clutch its head in agony, providing Hyun with the opening he needs to escape. He slides past the creature and reaches the exit, but the heavy door proves difficult to open as he desperately struggles against it. With the alarm falling silent and the monster charging toward him, Hyun throws his axe at the creature in a final act of desperation. The axe strikes the monster's mouth, giving Hyun enough time to push the door open and scramble inside before trying to force it shut. As the monster's tongue snakes through the gap, a panicked Hyun puts all his weight into the door, successfully slamming it shut and severing the limb. After locking the door and mourning the loss of his axe, he uses his flashlight to head down the stairs toward another exit. Hoping to be returned to the original hospital, he finds that this door opens much more easily than the previous one. Hyun is stunned to find himself in the main lobby on the first floor, which has been left in a state of complete and utter ruin. Papers and debris lie scattered everywhere as Hyun looks around the room, stammering in shock at what he discovered. A skeletal figure with deep, hollow eye sockets and long claws stands before him, lunging to attack the moment Hyun lowers his flashlight. When he shines the light back on the creature, it freezes instantly, leading Hyun to realize that the monster is paralyzed by brightness. Frustrated by the encounter, Hyun delivers a powerful punch that sends the skeleton's head tumbling to the floor. After muttering a brief apology for the decapitation, he continues through the dark hallway, unaware that two more skeletons are closing in from behind. Clad in patient robes, Hyun navigates the ruined corridor with his flashlight until he hears the sound of rapid footsteps approaching from the shadows. He turns to find two deformed, monstrous entities charging toward him and immediately aims his light at them. The two identical creatures are instantly frozen by the beam, but they prepare to strike the moment the light is switched off. With no time to retreat, Hyun kicks one monster away, but the second one lunges at him before he can even recover his breath. Hyun manages to dodge the attack and strike back, quickly pulling out his flashlight to freeze the monsters in place once more. He observes that the creatures possess rapid regenerative abilities and can even multiply from their own severed limbs. Realizing the danger of a prolonged fight, Hyun retreats into a nearby room and shuts the door, wondering if he can outsmart the creatures. He eventually reopens the door to lure the monsters into the dark room before rushing to the center and activating his flashlight. Once the monsters are immobilized by the light, Hyun slips out and shuts the door, finally securing the area so he can explore in peace. Further along, he briefly encounters another monster behind a door and decides to bypass it for now, eventually reaching a pair of locked doors. Suspecting one leads to an exit, he throws a chair at the glass panels, but they remain intact just as he had feared. He notices a lock and a cryptic note about a friendship anniversary, wondering if it refers to the day he first met Alexa. Hyun attempts to enter a code based on that memory, but the incorrect password triggers a loud, startling alarm. As he struggles to remember the date of their meeting in the basement, the alarm draws a swarm of monsters that he tries to hold back with his limited flashlight beam. Hyun fights his way through the pack to create an escape route, but one of the creatures manages to leap from behind and claw his back. Quick as a flash, Hyun dashes into a nearby room and shuts the door, slumping down against it as a long streak of blood marks the spot where he leaned. Overwhelmed with terror, Hyun curses under his breath while wearing hospital patient clothes and pressing his body against the door, a bright flashlight clenched in his teeth. His face is beaded with sweat and shows signs of deep exhaustion as his mouth hangs open, and he suddenly slides further down the door with his hair fluttering, leaving a long trail of blood behind him as he sits there in total fatigue. The flashlight in his hand remains lit as his voice trembles, but he tries to regain his composure, his eyes flashing as he realizes the wound is far too deep. Hyun forces himself to hold the flashlight and tries to reassure himself that while the injury isn't fatal, the blood loss is severe, leaving him pale, sweaty, and increasingly dizzy as he contemplates what will happen in a few hours. Suddenly, the number 5 appears on the wall, immediately catching his attention. Hyun stares at the red number 5 in confusion, recalling the 2 red arrows that pointed toward the door. He remembers the red markings and the note about a friendship memory, realizing the warning about entering the wrong code was vital. Despite his intense pain and exhaustion, Hyun deduces that the friendship memory refers to a date and the red numbers are the required digits. With long-haired, sharp-clawed ghosts rampaging outside, he desperately searches for a room with a number written on the wall. The hallway appears empty, so Hyun mentally reconstructs the chaotic scene he witnessed when he first ran inside. Seeing the next door open and his back soaked in red syrup, he decides to take a risk rather than wait for certain death as the ghost burst in. Hyun uses all his strength to kick the entities back before navigating through the chaotic crowd of dazed and fallen ghosts. Upon seeing the number 0 on the wall, he confirms it is part of the code, but he is immediately attacked from behind and screams in agony. Infuriated by the persistent ghosts, Hyun challenges them to approach before using a table to launch himself into a powerful counterattack. He executes a forceful maneuver away from the ghosts, but unfortunately sprains his ankle the moment he hits the ground. Collapsing onto the floor, a dizzy and sweating Hyun realizes he must close the door to survive his impending death. A long-haired ghost in a pink outfit stands motionless at the entrance, watching the silent door without attempting to enter. Hyun startles awake with dark circles under his eyes and notices a fresh red scratch, reminding himself that he only has one life remaining. Sitting up on a dark bed in a grimy room, he looks around in confusion and wonders if he has been taken to an emergency ward. In the gloomy, empty space, a bright number 8 on the wall catches his eye, and he focuses his flashlight on it. Having found the numbers 5, 0, and 8, he assumes the code starts with 0 but hesitates between the remaining combination. Gripping his flashlight, he realizes that a wrong guess will release the monsters again, making it essential to find the final digit. Hyun scans the unchecked rooms in the opposite hallway, just as the ghost in pink slowly emerges from the darkness. He pauses a step behind the entity, deciding that avoiding a confrontation is his best option before suddenly bolting forward. He searches the reception area and the syrup room for numbers without success before his attention is drawn to the signs for internal medicine and neurology. Hyun finally places his hand on the door latch, his face drenched in sweat as he desperately prays for just one more digit. A ghost appears at the door slot and stares out coldly, while Hyun wonders if the number is in that room before spotting a 2 in the corner of a door. He flings the door open and shines his light inside, feeling a surge of joy upon seeing the number 2 on the wall and deducing the code is either 528 or 825. His pupils contract and his expression falters as he hesitates between the two sequences, but he decides he must try when the ghost begins to rush toward him. The ghost seems oblivious to his presence behind it as he stares at the motionless doors and hesitantly recites the numbers 0, 5, 2, and 8. A long alarm beep sounds, causing Hyun to curse in despair as he realizes the code is 825 just as the ghost enters the room with its sharp claw. Hyun nimbly dodges the ghost's freezing claws, but he screams in anger when the creature brings its terrifying face close to his. He launches a counterattack and knocks the ghost down while asking why it keeps haunting him, but his body suddenly convulses in pain as he tries to enter the code. Long, sharp fingers pierce deep into his back, but despite the agonizing pain, he manages to press the final digits of the sequence. Hyun collapses just as the door opens, his back covered in wounds, and Lisa steps out of the shadows to catch him and offer gentle words of comfort. She smiles brightly and asks if he enjoyed the game, to which he can only offer a faint, exhausted insult as she continues to speak softly. Lisa promises to reveal her identity to him slowly and mentions their friendship anniversary, leaving Hyun wide-eyed with shock and disbelief. Memories of a smiling face and a reminder of their anniversary flash through his mind before he loses consciousness and later wakes up drenched in sweat. Ji-sung sits comfortably on the bed eating tangerines and offers one to Hyun after noticing his friend's panicked and sweaty state. Ji-sung asks if he had a nightmare, but Hyun feels a sharp pain and discovers a wound on his arm that matches the one from his dream. He realizes the dream was far too real and curses under his breath, while Ji-sung suggests he go to the vending machine to get something to drink. Hyun gloomily refuses and expresses his hatred for vending machines as a memory of his younger self smiling sweetly appears. In the memory, a girl with a bright smile but no eyes stands beside him as they hold hands while wearing flower bracelets. Since that incident, he frequently dreams of childhood memories he cannot fully recall, often featuring Lisa asking if he recognizes her. The effort of remembering causes a throbbing headache just as a cheerful voice rings out under a clear sky, announcing a departure for school. A week after his hospital discharge, Hyun heads to school while worrying that he might fail his upcoming midterm exam. His thoughts are interrupted when a girl suddenly crashes into him, sending them both tumbling to the ground. A disheveled Minji frantically apologizes as Hyun slowly picks himself up and responds in a soft voice. Hyun's attention is drawn to a ghost clinging to Minji's back while she continues to offer her apologies. Minji frantically searches for a doll on the ground, while Hyun looks on in confusion at the eerie, naked figure. Suspecting the doll is the source of the haunting, Hyun watches as Minji grabs it and runs away with a final apology. Hyun starts to call out a warning but stops to slap his own face, reminding himself not to get involved in other people's business. Despite his efforts to ignore it, he feels a sense of danger and cannot stop thinking about the unsettling doll. Hyun breaks into a sweat and hopes things will be fine if the doll disappears, but then he notices someone peeking through a doorway. Hyun approaches a window and sees Minji holding the doll while hesitantly telling the club president about her visit to an abandoned house. Hyun bursts through the door and shouts for them not to touch the doll, startling both Minji and a boy named D-Sun. D-Sun asks Hyun why he is there, leaving Hyun stunned and wondering how this stranger knows his name. Hyun notices a banner for a YouTube channel called Jiggy Dunk and a room filled with occult items like charms and skulls. D-Sun welcomes him and explains that their occult club deeply admires Choi Ji-sung, whose photo sits prominently on the table. Hyun is surprised to hear D-Sun praise Ji-sung's courage and charisma with such intense enthusiasm. D-Sun continues to ramble about Ji-sung's professional equipment and how he considers the man to be his ideal role model. D-Sun proudly claims that he even spent 300,000 won on his hair just to resemble his idol. When D-Sun mentions that Hyun was the only person Ji-sung ever invited to a hunt, Hyun rushes forward and interrupts him. Hyun points coldly at the doll on the table and demands to know where it came from, causing Minji to tremble in silence. Hyun urges her to explain everything that has happened, certain that the doll is the reason she is in trouble. Minji grows increasingly flustered as she reflects on her situation, her eyes flickering with hesitation as she recalls the sight of an old building shrouded in darkness. She mentions visiting an abandoned house the previous weekend, prompting an immediate question about whether it was the mysterious building featured in Jae-sung's stream. As she walks through the night, she enters a dark, unsettling room that gives her goosebumps, noting the stained hallways and cluttered furniture typical of a deserted home. The silence is suddenly broken by a noise that makes her scream in terror, and she holds her phone with a pale, trembling hand as a voice asks what happened. The person on the line asks if she has found anything, noting that Vice President Park Ji-hun has easy access to charms through his shaman grandmother. They add that Young Yoon-jae has a cousin who is a horror YouTuber with plenty of information, leaving Minji feeling a heavy burden of expectation. The voice questions if she joined the occult club just to stand out or escape academic pressure, causing an exhausted Minji to lower her phone as the voice fades. She is told she must produce results this semester, such as a poltergeist video, just as she spots a grotesque doll sitting in front of a door. Minji slowly approaches and shines her flashlight on the doll, sitting down with a look of reluctance while thinking about how unlucky the object appears to be. With a sudden look of determination, she tells the club president she can finally contribute and proceeds to pick up the haunted doll. When the doll's face ends up right next to hers, Minji screams in a panic and collapses to the ground, frantically looking around her surroundings. The voice on the phone asks why she screamed, but before she can recover, the doll draws close again, sending her fleeing from the cursed place in a state of terror. Although she realizes she left the doll behind, she prioritizes her life and keeps running until she finally reaches home and announces her return. Panting heavily, she opens her door and realizes she truly encountered a ghost, acknowledging that the location Jae-sung chose was indeed supernatural. She regrets not bringing an EMF meter to record the event, but her thoughts are cut short when she sees the haunted doll sitting neatly on her bed. After throwing the doll into the trash, a terrified Minji stares at it, realizing that no matter how many times she discards it, the object will not stay gone. The doll appears on her bed once more, having followed her back to her room and positioned its cold face right behind her back. Minji screams in horror while covering her face and ears, breaking into tears as the haunted doll continues to torment her without mercy. Feeling completely doomed, she sits trembling as she recounts how she has been seeing ghosts out of the corner of her eye ever since. Unable to sleep, she describes how the doll appeared on the street just minutes ago and began walking toward her, forcing her to run away once again. Minji trembles as she explains that she bumped into Hyun while hoping the club experts could find a way to deal with the doll. Hyun scratches his head in frustration before squeezing the ghost doll's face and holding it up to Minji to ask if she can still see the spirit. The ghost suddenly appears behind Minji, causing her to scream in terror that it is still there while Hyun looks on helplessly. Hyun considers if the ghost would change targets if the doll had a new owner, or if the curse is tied specifically to the first possessor. As Minji runs to find Vice President Dehan for a protective charm, the ghost laughs and pushes a large foam box toward her. Hyun shouts a warning and shields Minji from the falling box, taking the blow to his head before checking to see if she is unharmed. Minji stammers her gratitude while Hyun glares at the ghost, realizing it is a malicious spirit driven entirely by ill intent. He notes the curse has begun despite the spirit's lack of consciousness, and the ghost proceeds to trip Minji as she nears the stairs. Hyun catches Minji to save her from falling, but a nearby window suddenly shatters from a mysterious force, leaving her paralyzed with fear. While onlookers gossip about the broken window, Hyun and Minji try to burn the doll during lunch, but the ghost remains as Hyun notes their efforts were futile. Minji weeps over her misfortune, but Hyun encourages her to stand up, reminding her that crying will not solve their problem. As the bell rings, Minji leaves the doll behind and reflects on how Hyun has been protecting her despite his cold and intimidating appearance. Realizing she would have been in great danger without him, she wonders if he can see ghosts and considers inviting him to join the club. When they return to the classroom, Minji is horrified to find the ghost doll sitting on the desk once again. Minji screams that she cannot take it anymore and hurls the doll to the floor just as Hana enters and sees it lying there. Hana asks what the object is, and when the ghost doll lunges at her face, she glares at it without fear, forcing it to retreat. Hyun watches in disbelief as the teacher and other students enter, questioning the presence of a male student before the teacher calls for attention. The teacher introduces a transfer student, while the girls loudly protest a boy being allowed into the female students' area. Before the teacher can finish, Hana walks toward Hyun, leaving the instructor confused by her sudden movement. Hana suddenly slaps Hyun across the face and coldly declares it to be revenge for their previous encounter, shocking everyone present. Two female students express their disbelief and frustration before the teacher suddenly erupts in anger. The teacher orders the boy to leave as Hyun holds his slapped cheek, protesting that he has never met the girl before. Hana grabs his shirt and whispers a reminder of how he used to torment them, leaving Hyun in a state of shock. Hana claims she never forgets a voice, triggering a memory in Hyun of a small ghost who once begged him for mercy. Recalling how he had struck the ghost with an iron bar, Hyun pulls Hana away while the teacher and students watch in confusion. As the students gossip, Minji watches in bewilderment until two hands touch her shoulders, causing her to faint from terror. Behind the school, a furious Hyun demands to know if Hana is human or a monster, but she calmly notes that the bell has rung. Hana explains she is there because of her mother's request, prompting a worried Hyun to ask if she means Lesa. Hana remains unsure of Lesa's plans, but Hyun begs to be left alone until Hana reveals she was ordered to watch over him. Hyun is driven to the brink of madness just as a ghost appears behind him, suggesting that those in trouble should be helped. When Hyun asks who is in danger, the ghost points to the rooftop where a possessed Minji stands with a ghost doll. Realizing Minji is being haunted and has lost her soul, Hyun panics as he searches for a way to save her. Knowing he cannot reach the roof in time, Hyun remembers how the ghost doll had previously recoiled from Hana's presence. Hyun begs Hana for help, but she coldly questions why she should intervene until he points out her superior strength over the ghost. Hana agrees to help on the condition that he fulfills a request, just as Minji begins to step toward the edge of the roof. Desperate to save Minji, Hyun agrees to any terms, leading Hana to demand his emotions as she observes his erratic behavior. Hana finds it strange how humans can shift from rage to tearful pleading, wondering if such emotional volatility is a natural instinct. She reflects on her own existence as a created being with an empty soul, having never experienced birth, growth, or human feeling. Driven by a desire to understand the nature of human emotion, she ignores Hyun's frantic claims that he understands. With a dark gaze, Hana commands the spirit to stop moving and informs Hyun that he has only 2 minutes to act. Hana tells Hyun to go save the victim while she handles the situation, tossing him a familiar talisman. Hyun recognizes it as the one he lost in the basement, and Hana notes that he should already know how to use its power. Realizing his mother sent it, Hyun runs toward the scene and decides to bite down on the talisman to activate it. He arrives just as the 2 minutes expire, catching Minji and the ghost doll before they can fall over the edge. As they all tumble back to safety, Hyun is surprised to find that the ghost doll was pulled back along with them. Hyun delivers a powerful slap to the ghost, realizing the talisman allows him to physically strike spirits before chasing it down. After defeating the doll, Hyun removes the talisman and recalls that it originally only provided protection from evil spirits. He wonders if Lesa modified the charm to allow physical contact with ghosts and why she chose to give it to him. Hana arrives and notes the quick end, while Hyun observes the doll was physically weak before she calmly decides to consume it. She explains the doll is broken and has killed, so she offers it reincarnation by inhaling its dark energy. Hana hears voices filled with murderous intent and feels a wave of unpleasant resentment washing over her. She spits out a cloudy marble, prompting Hyun to ask more questions that Hana finds increasingly annoying. Hana looks toward the sky thinking her mother would be pleased, while the teacher lectures about Jae's desires in the classroom. The remains of the doll turn to ash in the corner of the room as Minji wakes up on the roof, recalling what she witnessed. Minji remembers seeing Hyun biting the talisman while physically overpowering the ghost and regrets not filming the event. She notes that Hyun exorcised the spirit through sheer force after removing the charm, seemingly surpassing even Yi Yang. After the doll incident is resolved, D-Sun gives directions on how to position a picture of Hyun. D-Sun asks Minji if she managed to record Hyun's fight with the ghost, but she admits she has no footage. Minji insists that Hyun beat the spirit so badly that it was the only reason her haunting finally came to an end. D-Sun suggests a trip after the freshman exam, while Hyun finds himself struggling with his disastrous midterm result. Hyun has been plagued by horrific events and a nagging sense of having forgotten something important as his unimaginable journey begins. On the day of their departure, Hana coldly demands that Hyun hand something over, leaving him confused by her sudden request. She reminds him of his promise to give her his emotions, explaining that her appetite has returned after previously feeling unwell. Hyun cautiously asks if losing his emotions will turn him into a robot, but Hana dismisses his concern as complete nonsense. Without warning, Hana reaches out to touch him and asks what truly motivated him to save Minji. The question triggers a traumatic memory for Hyun, bringing back the image of a terrified, blood-stained young boy. A mysterious voice expresses fear, causing Hana to shudder as she realizes how much she loathes the sensation she just absorbed. Hana pulls away and mutters about accidentally taking some of his fear, before abruptly leaving a bewildered Hyun behind. Disung suddenly rushes over with a suitcase featuring his own face, but Hyun offers only a dismissive and disinterested response. As Hyun walks away, the class president, Han Ji-jun, watches his classmates with a sense of weary resignation. Ji-jun wonders how such different personalities can be so close, just as a friend urges him to find a seat on the bus. Photos taken by Disung capture the class enjoying their trip, from group lunches to the scenic heights of Seongsan Ilchulbang. After a day of sightseeing in Jeju and being followed constantly, an exhausted Hyun finally tells Hana to return to her own class. Hana agrees to leave for the night but mentions that she senses something unsettling and strange about their current location. When Hyun asks for details, she notes a sense of familiarity but decides to wait until she is certain before explaining further. Nearby students tease Hyun about his interaction with Hana, which he irritably denies just as a classmate calls them into the room. Inside, the room is filled with food and drinks, but a tired Hyun insists he would rather sleep than join the party. A friend encourages him to socialize before the school year ends, though Hyun argues that he has no money to contribute to the snacks. Another classmate points out that they haven't spent much time together because Hyun is always hanging out with Disung. They urge him to join since Disung is paying for everything, prompting Hyun to point out that the speaker hasn't paid anything either. Cheers and the sound of clinking glasses echo from the room as the group continues their revelry without pause. A young man standing outside the door marvels at the noise, noting how boldly they are drinking in the open. Yi-jun laughs it off, suggesting the teachers are too busy to notice, while his friend decides to stick with cola. When asked about Hyun Yu's whereabouts, Yi-jun explains he went for a walk, leaving the friend to wonder why he went alone to a dark hallway. Yi-jun assures him that Hyun Yu will return soon, while inside the room, the rest of the group has fallen into a drunken stupor. Hyun Yu wakes up with a throbbing headache and envies Yi-jun's peaceful sleep before a piercing whistle suddenly rings out. A loud voice orders everyone to gather for morning roll call, sending the students into a panic as they scramble to hide the evidence. An instructor stands outside the room as the students nervously count off to report their presence. Hyun Yu sighs wearily amidst the shouting and joins the count, calling out his number in turn. The instructor finds it strange that only 7 people are present in a room meant for 10, suspecting the students have been switching rooms. He ignores the inconsistent numbers for now, but realizes 3 students are missing and calls Ms. Yi Young to report the situation. Upon hearing that 4 girls are also missing, Hyun Yu and Yi Jun exchange uneasy glances, sensing that something is terribly wrong. Elsewhere, a terrified young man trembles as he insists he has escaped his past and finally made friends in high school. Grotesque red figures suddenly lunge at him with horrific sounds, mocking his claim of having friends and telling him to die. The floor beneath him transforms into a series of black tiles before opening into a void that swallows him whole. As he realizes his fate, the scene shifts to another person watching a violent confrontation amidst a chorus of hateful screams. The witness sits paralyzed in tears as a sea of blood rises to their neck, eventually fading into the image of a door in a dark hallway. Students gossip about the cancellation of their schedule, noting the tension among the teachers now that 7 students have vanished. While some suggest the missing students just went off to play together, others point out that the group wasn't even close. Someone recalls the resort's first rule, which forbids entering any room not listed on the map, prompting laughter from the girls. A girl dismisses the ghost stories as outdated occult club nonsense, prompting her friend to angrily insist that she listens seriously. Standing in a corner, Hana points out the strangeness she predicted, leading Hyun to question her about what she is hiding as she hesitates to answer. Hana admits she lacks details but suspects her family is responsible, causing a panicked Hyun to realize she is directly involved in the situation. When asked why she did not stop them, Hana indifferently questions why she should have as adults elsewhere begin ushering students into their room. The students are strictly ordered to stay in their assigned rooms without switching and to remain in place until further instructions are given at lunchtime. Someone suddenly grabs a hand while Rhea Sung leans against a wall and asks Hyun if this location resembles the abandoned house they previously encountered. Hyun expresses his uncertainty, while Hana calmly explains that there are strange rooms in existence that allow entry but prevent anyone from leaving. Hana describes these rooms as existing in impossible or isolated locations, prompting Rhea Sung to ask why she keeps following Hyun. Hyun explains that the situation is complicated, but compares the girl to the monster they encountered at the abandoned school. Hyun reveals that she is not human, leaving Rhea Sung shocked that such a monster could be wandering around freely in the outside world. Hana kicks Hyun to prove she is real, leading him to remark on her violent nature, while Rhea Sung watches the interaction with surprise. Rhea Sung asks about her healing abilities, and Hana explains that while she has never been injured, Hyun's previous punch did not heal because her body was incomplete. Rhea Sung reacts with shock to Hyun's past actions, but Hyun loudly reiterates his warning that the girl is actually a monster. Hana asks Hyun if he intends to save people again, noting that his fear is abnormal and questioning whether he plans to interfere in this matter. Rhea Sung realizes that Hana understands Hyun deeply, just as she suddenly declares that she will not back down from the situation. After mentioning a debt between them, Hana coldly departs to conduct her own investigation, leaving the others to fend for themselves. Rhea Sung and Hyun grumble about the girl's unpleasant attitude before Rhea Sung produces a map of the resort layout. Hyun asks where the map came from, and Rhea Sung explains that the school has rented the entire large-scale facility for their use. As they walk through the long two-story building, Hyun asks Rhea Sung why he is getting involved in this dangerous situation, just as something begins to emerge behind them. Rhea Sung explains that if this place is like the previous abandoned house, he might finally find clues regarding his mother's whereabouts. He remains silent, thinking that they both have their own hidden motives, while Yi Sung suggests they search for the strange room on a floor that includes rooms up to 110, a plaza, a service room, and a convenience store. Noting that the second floor goes up to room 213 while the first floor ends at room 110, Hyun questions if that is truly the last room as he points toward something further ahead. They encounter a door that looks like all the others, but after Hyun reads the sign for room 111, Yi Sung remarks that the situation seems incredibly strange. Hyun suggests opening the door in case others are trapped inside and unable to escape, but Yi Sung expresses concern that Hyun might also be sucked into the room. Hyun calmly tells Yi Sung to simply hold him back and places his hand on the doorknob, but he is suddenly startled by a voice announcing that his father has returned home. Losing his composure, Hyun calls out for his father as Yi Sung grabs his wrist and pulls him away from the door, resulting in both of them falling onto the floor. The door suddenly slams shut and vanishes, leaving the wall perfectly intact, prompting Yi Sung to shout and ask what was inside that made Hyun rush in, to which Hyun responds with a trembling voice. Hyun admits he has no idea as his mind suddenly went blank. While on the second floor, Yi Sung complains about the discomfort of their arms being tied together. Hyun agrees that he is also uncomfortable, and Hyun explains that their task is to open those strange rooms and wait for the trapped individuals to escape on their own. Yi Sung notes they must immediately capture the suspect behind this, and as Hyun offers to handle the arrest, the hallway lights suddenly go out, leaving him shocked by the power failure. Hyun wonders what they should do once they find the rooms, wishing they had asked the girl for specific instructions since ordinary people like them are nearly helpless. But Yi Sung is suddenly teleported away without a word. Yi Sung finds himself facing a dark hallway with a mysterious door at the end, as a strange sound echoes a name from the shadow. Yi Sung's expression pales as a voice chants for Okra to merge into their breath, proclaiming that though the entity has no roots or bones, it is the light born from their faith. The chanting continues, pleading for Okra to look upon them as they light a lamp of faith and begging the entity to listen, while they vow to erect a monument in its honor. Describing the world as a lie and Okra as a sacred dream, the voices pray for the truth to be revealed amidst the illusions and for the entity to show its true form. They pledge to engrave Okra into their hearts with ritual syrup, hailing the great light that rises at dawn and declaring that the entity will live within them forever. Hyun shouts for his friend to answer him, but when he turns around, he sees nothing but a deep, dark, and empty hallway. realizing that his friend's arm has slipped from his grasp. A panicked Hyun calls out for Choi Yi-sung while shining his flashlight and running down the corridor. Hyun wonders about the nature of the place as the hallway seems to stretch on endlessly, but he is suddenly struck with shock upon seeing something on a bare wall. Another door identical to the previous one appears, leading a bewildered Hyun to realize that the room only reveals itself when his flashlight shines upon it. Hyun turns away, deciding it is too dangerous to proceed alone and that he must first find Yi-sung, who he assumes is likely caught up in some foolish antic. A small, ghostly figure suddenly appears and walks past a terrified Hyun, heading straight toward the mysterious door that had just manifested. An image of Hyun as a young boy suddenly appears as the darkness within the doorway transforms into a vibrant amusement park. Thick black smoke billows from the building as a rescue worker wearing a full mask rushes over and stares down the hallway in deep thought. The worker realizes there is only one person left to save when a strange plume of black smoke suddenly appears and catches his attention. The smoke takes the shape of a human shadow pointing toward a room as if guiding him, and the rescue worker quickly rushes inside without a second thought. The father notices a small cloth covering a baby as a staff member rushes to pick the child up. Then he nods to a mysterious shadow that returns the gesture before a cry of pain echoes. Hyun's mother scolds the father for getting injured, but he explains that he managed to save a child who was around the same age as their son. The father tells Hyun that one must help those in need, and while the boy expresses his own desire to save people, his mother immediately voices her disapproval. Hyun considers his father the greatest person in the world and resolves to be just like him, even as his father warns him about the dangers of such work. Deciding to start by helping a peer, Hyun thinks of a mysterious child who appears in the same spot at the park every single day. Regardless of the season or the weather, the child is always there, prompting Hyun to remember his father's lessons about assisting those in trouble. Determined to help if the child is actually a person, Hyun approaches the figure sitting under a tree to confirm his suspicion. Hyun drops a leaf onto the girl's head to see if it makes contact, and after it does, he smiles and offers a friendly greeting as she looks up through her long hair. Hyun reaches out and invites her to play, leaving the girl startled by the sudden offer before she unexpectedly stands up. Surprised to see her stand for the first time, Hyun watches as she touches her hair and begins to cough. Seeing her struggle, Hyun tells her she does not have to speak, but the girl hesitates and manages to offer a small response. Surprised that she can talk, Hyun invites her to the swings and offers to push her, which brings tears of emotion to the girl's eyes. She takes Hyun's hand, and he leads her to the swings before they both head over to play on the merry-go-round. After playing until they are both dizzy and unable to stand, Hyun eventually uses a pair of scissors to trim the girl's hair. He finishes cutting her hair into a cute shoulder-length style with bangs, and then offers her a bowl of hot, spicy rice cakes. Her eyes light up as she takes a bite, and after Hyun asks if she likes it, they go to watch a dragonfly trapped in a spiderweb and gently pull it free. They let the dragonfly fly away, leaving a stone engraved with the date of their friendship as Hyun smiles with pure joy. The two friends wear matching bracelets and share ice cream, though nearby adults whisper and other children watch in fear as Hyun appears to be sitting and laughing alone. Later, Hyun wipes a nosebleed with his glove and builds a snowman with a red scarf, which he then wraps around the girl's neck. The girl thanks him as Hyun looks on happily, but his moment is interrupted when someone suddenly grabs his hand and calls out to him. Hyun's friends plead with him to play, with one boy shouting for him to stop playing with ghosts. Another boy trembles at the thought of a haunting, but Hyun pulls away, insisting his companion is not a ghost. The children stare at the empty bench with dark expressions, leaving Hyun confused by their behavior. A friend pulls Hyun toward the playground, questioning who he is talking to while the girl watches them from the snow. Suddenly, the girl pulls Hyun behind her and kicks the other boy into the street just as a large vehicle approaches. Hyun's friend falls directly into the path of an oncoming bus, forcing the driver to slam on the brakes. The bus swerves just in time to avoid the boy, leaving the driver panicked and the child crying in terror. As Hyun stands in shock, the demon girl smiles brightly and pulls him away to continue playing. Hyun tells her she was wrong to hurt his friend and demands an apology, to which the demon casually agrees. When asked if she saw the bus coming, the light fades from the demon's eyes as she claims she was unaware. Hyun drops the subject and suggests they go get fish cakes, a proposal the demon happily accepts. While they walk together, an elderly man passes by and warns Hyun that associating with strange things brings trouble. Hyun is confused by the man's cryptic words about things that are present even if they cannot be fully seen. The man warns that malevolent energy brings misfortune, but Hyun defends his friend while she remains expressionless. The man advises Hyun to stay away from such entities, warning that they will eventually drain his life force. The demon watches the man leave as a sharp glass shard appears in the snow, while Hyun tells her to ignore him. The demon begins to cry, fearing Hyun will abandon her, but he reassures her that the old man was the strange one. Hyun makes a pinky promise that they will be friends forever, and the demon happily agrees to the vow. As the seasons change and flowers bloom, a plant withers in a room filled with the sound of constant coughing. Hyun lies in bed with a high fever, while his worried parents tend to him with a basin of water. Hyun's mother reports that his fever remains high despite numerous hospital visits, and his condition continues to deteriorate without a known cause. Other mothers gossip that Hyun plays with ghosts rather than children his age, but his father insists that no such entities surround the boy. In a memory, the father calls out to Hyun, who looks up and responds to his parents' greeting. When asked if he is playing by himself, Hyun explains that he is simply observing insects on the ground. The father initially assumes Hyun is just socially awkward, but as the fever persists, he decides to investigate the rumors of a ghostly companion. The entity expresses a desire to play chess at Hyun's house, leading the boy to reflect on how the creature remains invisible to everyone else. Hyun concludes that his companion is an invisible person rather than a ghost, as they can physically interact despite his father being unable to see it. Since it is his father's day off, Hyun decides to ask for permission to have his friend over, much to the entity's excitement. Hyun instructs the entity to stay close behind him, confident that his father will eventually understand the situation. Upon arriving home, Hyun enters the security code and asks his father if he can bring a friend inside to play. As the father welcomes them, he momentarily glimpses a grotesque, human-shaped figure looming behind his son instead of a normal child. The vision vanishes instantly, leaving the father shaken by the sudden and overwhelming sense of a dark omen. As Hyun enters, a strange black mist drifts past the father, who stands frozen with the realization that something invisible has just crossed his threshold. Terrified by the unknown presence his son has brought home, the father looks down as his phone screen suddenly illuminates. The screen displays a contact for a shaman as the entity smiles, plotting to become even closer to Hyun than his own family. In Chapter 35, Hyun waves goodbye to his companion as they prepare to part ways for the time being. The entity returns to their usual tree while Hyun reflects on his friend's lack of a home or physical needs, eventually asking for its name. The entity admits to having forgotten its own name, leaving Hyun to ponder the lonely existence of the friend only he can see. To Hyun, the entity appears as a cheerful young girl who always greets him warmly and waits faithfully for his arrival. Believing he is the only person the entity has, Hyun feels a deep responsibility to stay by its side as the scene shifts to a toy sword. As the pirate toy pops out of the plastic barrel, the demon screams in surprise while Hyun laughs joyfully and shouts for more. Hyun agrees to play another round, but his mother touches her head in discomfort, mentioning a strange buzzing in her ears that sounds like whispering voices. When she asks if something is standing before Hyun, the father claims he sees nothing, but realizes that if they both hear the buzzing, the entity must be real. Since objects are physically moving, the father wonders what kind of creature they are dealing with and if the old shaman will be able to help them. The demon irritably demands another round, and though Hyun's voice trembles as he agrees, he suddenly suffers a nosebleed and collapses to the floor. His mother cries out in alarm, but Hyun quickly stands back up and tries to reassure her that he is fine and only felt a brief moment of dizziness. Despite the mother's worry, the father insists on taking him to the hospital, though Hyun asks if his invisible friend can come along with them. The father tells Hyun to go with his mother while the friend stays home with him. Then he sits on the floor to address the empty space. Introducing himself as Hyun's father, the man places a pen and paper on the floor and asks the entity if it knows how to write. The pen vanishes and a large X appears on the paper, prompting the father to calmly suggest they communicate using simple circles and crosses. He explains that Hyun has been constantly ill since they became friends, and suggests that a spirit's presence is draining the life from the boy. When the father asks the entity to leave for the sake of Hyun's health, The paper marked with an X is suddenly torn violently in half. Aggressive scratches and overlapping marks begin to manifest across the walls and doors, spreading rapidly throughout the entire room. The father maintains his composure despite the display of anger, but their interaction is interrupted by the sound of the doorbell ringing. An elderly woman, likely the shaman, arrives with a young girl and enters the house to fulfill a debt of gratitude for the father's past help. The father asks the shaman to help send the entity to a peaceful place, noting that it seems to behave much like a lonely child. Looking into her mirror, the shaman explains that the entity is not a true soul, but merely a hollow shell that has lost its spiritual essence. She states that it must be forcibly expelled since it has no soul to guide, and once banished, it will not return unless it harbors true malice. Upon returning from the hospital, Hyun excitedly asks about his friend, only to find the house covered in red ritualistic markings from floor to ceiling. Hyun's expression darkens as he asks his father what has happened to the house and where his invisible friend has gone. Hyun's sudden words prompt his father to look around the house, but seeing nothing unusual, the man becomes certain that his son is seeing something invisible. When the father claims the friend has gone home, Lee Hyun tearfully protests and demands to know where his companion is as his father firmly grips his shoulders. The father commands Lee Hyun to stop playing with that friend, but the boy trembles and reminds him of his own lesson about helping those in trouble. Struggling to explain, the father watches as Hyun breaks away and runs outside, shouting that he must find his friend. Ignoring his father's calls, Hyun runs to a specific tree only to find it empty, leaving him looking around and gasping for breath. As the days pass, Hyun continues his search for the one he considers a friend, but his efforts only lead to feelings of helplessness and desperate tears. Nature flourishes and new buds grow on the branches. Hyun's mother asks her husband to pick up their son on his day off. She encourages him to bridge the distance that has grown between them since the incident, and the father agrees before heading out to find Hyun walking alone. A street vendor notices her regular young customer and asks why he is no longer buying 2 portions of rice cakes. Hyun sadly explains that his friend has disappeared, leading the woman to suggest that the other child might have simply transferred school. After saying goodbye, Hyun walks on with his head down until a stone he kicks rolls toward a pair of muddy feet. Looking up, Hyun sees a girl with messy short hair who appears to be covered in blood before she suddenly turns and walks away. Believing he has finally found his friend, Hyun chases after her into a construction site, ignoring the vendor's frantic warnings that the area is dangerous. The woman shouts that he cannot enter the site, but Hyun is too focused on following the figure to notice his surroundings. Panting heavily, Hyun finally stops as the entity sheds tears and smiles, telling the boy how much it missed him while opening its arms. In Chapter 36, the panicked vendor prepares to call emergency services just as Hyun's father arrives and asks what is wrong. She explains that a child ran into the unstable construction site, causing the father to freeze in shock. After spotting his son's backpack on the ground, the scene shifts back to Hyun, who is catching his breath deep inside the structure. The entity cries with a familiar smile, expressing how much it missed Lee Hyun and beckoning him to come closer. Hyun rushes toward the figure he calls Shizu, asking if she has been injured, but the entity remains silent and pulls him into an embrace. Sobbing, the creature tells Lee Hyun they can no longer be friends, but as Hyun insists on their bond, the demon pulls him into a tight embrace and declares that for them to truly be friends, Hyun must die. The demon suddenly steps back and plunges off the edge, dragging a terrified and screaming Hyun down with him. Realizing the fall from such a height would be fatal, Hyun manages to grab onto a nearby iron pillar and frantically questions the creature's actions. The demon insists they fall together while Hyun clings to the structure, shouting that they will both perish. Hanging from the top floor of the construction site, Hyun struggles against the weight just as his father rushes onto the scene. Horrified to see his son in danger, the father watches as Hyun's grip fails and he begins to plummet toward the ground. As Hyun falls in terror, his father utilizes his experience as a rescue worker to leap forward and reach for his son. The father successfully catches Hyun but slides across the floor and strikes an iron pillar, prompting the frightened boy to look up and recognize his savior. Gasping for air, the father checks on Hyun's safety just as falling iron beams begin to strike one another, signaling that they must evacuate the area immediately. Hyun's attention shifts to the demon charging toward them like a madman, causing him to cry out in alarm. The creature is struck by a falling beam, and the father and son watch in horror as the entire site collapses into a thick cloud of dust and debris. When the metal finally settles, Hyan is too paralyzed with fear to open his eyes, while his father begins to cough up blood from his injury. Despite his condition, the father asks if Hyan is okay, leaving the boy in a state of shock as he realizes his father was impaled by a metal rod while shielding him. Hyan screams in terror at the sight of the wound, but his father tells him to remain still as a heavy silence falls over the wreckage. The father reassures Hyan that help is on the way and encourages him to stay strong and resilient. Hyan tearfully apologizes, but his father smiles and insists it was not his fault just as the rescue team finally arrives at the scene. The father's reassurance echoes in Hyan's mind as his mother arrives and collapses in grief upon learning her family is buried under the collapsed steel. As the mother is supported by bystanders, the phrase, "It is not your fault," repeats over and over in the air. After a search with rescue dogs, a worker announces that they have finally located the two victims trapped beneath the debris. Pale and staring blankly with hollow eyes, Hyan is pulled from the wreckage, remaining completely motionless after the traumatic event. Hyan spots the demon standing a few paces away and rushes toward it, screaming and demanding to know why it committed such an act. A shackle suddenly appears and cinches around the demon's neck, as Hyan cries out that it caused his father's death while onlookers worry about the boy's state of shock. The demon pitifully claims they will be best friends forever now that no one can interfere, but Hyan's mother pulls him away, urging him to look at her and go to the hospital. A pale hand holding a chain emerges as a chilling voice declares it is too late and that the world has never been a perfect place. A demon in human form uses the chain to restrain the smaller creature, telling the young boy to accept the inevitable. The figure explains that the small demon's existence will be erased from both the world and memory, and Hyan collapses as the words are spoken. His mother screams his name in terror as the small demon is dragged through a spatial portal and vanishes from sight. At the hospital, the doctor diagnoses Hyan with short-term amnesia, leaving his mother to wonder why he remembers the accident but nothing of the previous year. Weeping in the hospital corridor, the mother realizes that despite losing her husband and her son's memories, she must find the strength to carry on. Later at home, the mother tries to give Hyan his medicine, but stops when she notices him seemingly talking to thin air. Fearing the return of the ghost, she is stunned when Hyan addresses his father, leading her to ask through tears if her husband is truly present. Hyan confirms his father's presence and innocently asks his mother if they can all continue living together as a family. He reassures her that they will be fine since he can see his father even if she cannot, and the boy smiles as he walks along. With his mother holding one hand and his father's spirit walking on the other side, the family appears whole once again. They go camping like any other family, but while playing outside, Hyan suddenly suffers a nosebleed and struggles to stand. The boy hesitantly informs his mother of the nosebleed, causing her to rush to his side in a state of deep concern. As she worries that history is repeating itself, a man approaches and explains that spirits should not remain among the living, regardless of their nature. The mother recognizes the newcomer as a well-known local figure, while the father's spirit remains silent and contemplative. The man observes the spirit and reflects on the lingering traces left behind before handing over a phone number. He suggests that someone else is better equipped to handle the situation and instructs the mother to visit a specific location on the 49th day of mourning. Heavy emotions from the past make it difficult to move on, necessitating a proper farewell ritual as time passes until Hyan is seen sleeping in his mother's arms. While Hyan sleeps peacefully, his mother arrives at the temple exhausted and breathless, offering her greetings to the resident monk. A young monk sweeping the courtyard recalls his master's instructions to welcome a guest arriving that afternoon with a child on her back. The young monk leads the mother and Hyan inside, explaining that he has been expecting their arrival just as he was told. After the mother expresses her gratitude, the scene shifts to a serene temple hall where a monk performs a ritual using paper and various seeds. Hyan and his mother wait patiently for the monk to finish his task before he places a protective necklace around the boy's neck. The monk explains the necklace will ward off evil, but warns that the protection is temporary, advising the parents to teach Hyan not to meddle in spiritual affairs. He instructs Hyan to bite down on the amulet until it cracks if he is ever directly threatened by spirits, providing 20 minutes of protection. The charm only activates when held in the mouth during a deep breath and serves as a one-time second life that must be used with great care. The monk notes that today marks the 49th day since the father's death, a fact the mother quickly confirms. As the monk prepares the soul-releasing ceremony, the mother thanks him, and the sound of rhythmic chanting soon fills the temple ground. The prayer calls for the removal of all obstacles and the dissolution of karmic debts, seeking a path of light through the darkness. It guides the soul across the sea of suffering toward a pure world, where it may rest upon a lotus throne bathed in compassionate light. Hyun watches as dark shadows depart from his father's form, accompanied by the father's lingering memories of the day his son was born. The father recalls his initial disbelief at becoming a parent while his wife playfully urged him to focus and record their new son. They marveled at the baby's tiny fingers as the father was overcome by a profound sense of joy, relief, and newfound purpose. Along with deep respect for his wife, he felt a heavy burden of responsibility and wondered how he could ever be a good enough father. His world became more vibrant yet far more terrifying as he began to fear that he might one day fail to protect his child. That persistent fear shaped the rest of his life, even as he recalled earlier days when he and his wife struggled as inexperienced parents. The father had suggested covering only the baby's midsection with a blanket, though the mother felt that such a measure was insufficient. The father thinks to himself that things are far from fine, haunted by the image of his son shivering from a fever under a thin blanket, and he thanks Hyun for everything. He expresses his profound happiness for the chance to be a father and apologizes for being unable to stay by his son's side for the rest of his life. Regretting that he only left behind painful memories, he says that Hyun simply living is enough for him as the boy reaches out to touch the dark essence drifting from his father's soul. Hyun cries out in grief while his father's soul laments leaving him alone in such a cruel world, all while blood begins to stream down the boy's face once more. Ignoring the blood mixing with his tears, Hyun desperately begs his father not to leave as the man gazes at his young son and weeps in silence. The father stands and walks away, promising that they will eventually meet again and be a family once more while professing his deep love for his son. As Hyun tries to call out to his father one last time, a monk suddenly interrupts him and begins to explain the consequences of his action. The monk warns that calling back the deceased will trap them in the mortal realm forever, prompting a silent Hyun to turn away and rush out into the courtyard. Someone calls out to Hyun as he reaches forward, silently pleading for his father not to leave before finally coming to a halt on the stone steps. He collapses to his knees as his father's soul vanishes completely, and though his mother cannot see the spirit, her son's reaction causes her to cover her mouth in grief. As tears continue to fall, the monk speaks, noting that a life's call has been heard and instructing them to follow the path that is open. Suddenly, a haunting voice begins to echo repeatedly, obsessively chanting that everything is his fault. A dark shadow coalesces into a distinct form and speaks in an eerie voice about helping those in need, leaving Hyun momentarily stunned. As he trembles and reaches for the dark figure, Hana suddenly appears and grabs his hand, demanding that Lee Hyun snap out of it and explain what he is doing. In Chapter 38, Hana looks down at her hand and laments that she intended the gift for her mother, just as a bead shatters and the world around them begins to fracture. Hyun gasps in confusion as fragments of his memories from childhood to the present suddenly flash before him, leaving him in a state of shock. Hana turns toward a black void that has opened in space and tells Hyun to hurry, leading him into a dark dimension as he follows her with questions. When asked why she helped him, Hana admits that she had originally intended to leave him to his fate, a thought she truly meant at the time. Recalling how she was stunned after touching him, Hana suddenly kicks Hyun's leg, blaming the act on the negative emotions she absorbed while he asks why she did that. Hyun asks if the person she calls mother is actually Lessa and requests to be taken to her after the trip, but Hana refuses and questions why she should comply. His mother is currently asleep and cannot be reached, and after they teleport out of the dark dimension, Hyun realizes that since his memories are intact, the others must have entered that room as well, which Hana then confirms. Hana explains that the room traps people in their own trauma forever, making it impossible to escape alone without someone else breaking them out, a process that preserves their memories unlike if the room were to simply vanish. If the room disappears, the fate of one's memories and soul becomes uncertain, as the space is filled with the occupant's emotions and requires an external, more powerful emotion to shatter the existing one. Only then will the room finally collapse. Hana explains that the orb of hatred destroyed the room in Hyun's case, and since her family is responsible, she will handle the situation while her mother is still asleep. Noting that things have spiraled out of control and expressing her disapproval, she urges Choi to find the brown-haired boy before his soul completely shatters. Hyun immediately thinks of his friend Choi Hyun and prepares to leave, thanking Hana for saving him, while she impassively warns him not to remain trapped in the past. After declaring she will not help him again, the scene shifts to a mysterious location where someone dips a wooden stick into a bowl of red liquid. The tip of the stick is pressed into young Ji-sung's hand as music plays unnoticed in the dark of night, with lyrics describing the children as seeds. As the song echoes the name of Ok-sa across a tear-soaked land, Ji-sung's hand becomes covered in the red fluid while the music continues to praise their deity. Ji-sung uses his blood-red arm to leave prints upon the wall, after which someone gently wipes his skin clean and asks him a kind question. The person asks if it hurts while the music continues to chant about Ok-sa and the manifestation of a human form emerging from the darkness. With a sorrowful expression, the woman apologizes to the boy but expresses her pride in him, to which Ji-sung replies that he only wishes for everything to stop. The music pleads for the embrace of despair as time passes, leading to a prayer gathering where a man standing on a podium addresses the crowd with his back turned. He declares that the faith they have built is now beyond any doubt and remains unshakable regardless of the suffering they endure. He announces that the deity's presence is drawing near and will soon manifest in the world, just as a door swings open and a footprint appears on the wooden floor. The man watches in silence while the stunned worshippers look on, as young Ji-sung gazes up at a small shadow appearing before a strange drawing on the wall. The onlookers stare in wide-eyed amazement as someone trembles and cries out that the great Ok-sa has finally descended upon them. The people below begin to pray and weep as the melodic music resumes, singing of their journey together toward the ultimate source of their faith. While the song speaks of lighting their sincere faith, Ji-sung sits in the yard playing with leaves and thinking to himself that all adults are foolish. Something catches his attention as a strange round shadow appears on the ground, but Ji-sung shows no fear and asks if it is a wandering ghost. He claims to know that Ok-sa does not exist and is merely a fabrication of foolish adults, noting that the adults cannot hear the ghost's words anyway. He tells the unseen spirit to return to the afterlife and stop deceiving the adults, but he becomes angry when a pile of leaves suddenly flies toward him. Wondering what is happening, he realizes that the spirit posing as Ok-sa has resided there since that day, with every morning beginning with a prayer. The evening concluded with a chant of praise, and no one doubted that existence anymore as calling the deity's name became as natural as breathing until one day. The voice of that entity began to resonate, and soon its form was revealed as a child slightly smaller than the narrator who completely transformed within a year. It was incredibly strange that the adults failed to notice, truly believing she was a deity when she likely had never been an ordinary ghost from the start. Or perhaps it was because the foolish adults kept worshipping Lady Lessa, causing the ghost to grow stronger regardless of whether she was truly Aksa or not. The narrator was determined not to believe any of it, even as Lessa gently told the crowd that their prayers and songs had allowed her to grow into her current form. Claiming to be reborn and grateful for their devotion, she opened a gateway for them to reach a true resting place beyond all earthly pain as the followers wept. She clarified that she was not the one who had created the gateway and stated that the one to thank was actually the follower Jaeyoung. His mother wept with joy as she looked at him and urged Jaeyoung to join her in a place free from sorrow and suffering, while the boy remained standing outside. He reached out and warned his mother that something felt wrong, but he was forced to follow her inside and began looking around with growing anxiety. Jaeyoung saw everyone smiling and expressing gratitude as they basked in the sunlight of a green meadow, where his attention was drawn to the swaying flower. He was shocked to see large, round eyes instead of stamens inside the flowers and cried out to his mother about the strangeness of the place. His mother did not seem to hear him in her state of overwhelming happiness, so he called out to others just as an eye suddenly exploded and splattered syrup everywhere. Countless horrific insects emerged from the burst eye, causing Jaeyoung to panic and call for his mother before freezing as he stared at her. His mother's gentle, smiling face had become distorted along with everyone else's, as red rain fell from a crimson sky onto Jaeyoung's bewildered face. Lessa scratched her face and wondered if this was not allowed, casually remarking that souls from the other side were considered foreign objects in this world. She pondered how they could settle while apologizing for her shortcomings, ignoring Jaeyoung's desperate screams for her to return his mother to him. Looking more bored than thoughtful, she leaned down and apologized to the boy, suggesting that she simply needed to make everything beautiful again. Suddenly, someone's rib was pulled upward as a flower bloomed atop the bone, while tree-like trunks began sprouting from another person's arm. Flowers began blooming from every part of the followers' bodies, and where there were flowers, swarms of insects were sure to follow. Butterflies swarmed the people in this so-called paradise of joy, as someone hummed that the heaven of Aksa had finally arrived. The chosen children are commanded to revere Aksa, the savior who promises eternal salvation as they merge until all boundaries vanish. Jisung watches in horror as the townspeople melt like dough and fuse together, causing him to scream out in protest. Jisung rushes to embrace his mother and begs her not to die, while a mysterious voice continues to call for singing and dancing. As the voice promises a paradise of eternal joy, a helpless Jisung declares that he will no longer refer to the entity as a mere ghost. Trembling, he pleads for everyone to be restored, noting that while they may have seemed foolish, they were people who had endured great suffering. He asks if their grief doesn't make them worthy of pity, prompting Lessa to apologize and attempt to properly refine her messy creation. Her attempts only make the mass more deformed, leading her to admit failure just as Jisung begins to cough something up. After coughing up 2 flowers, a miserable Jisung blames Lessa for everything, prompting her to open a black door and tell him to leave. Lessa claims that those who deny her have no reason to stay, leaving Jisung stunned by her sudden command to depart. Jisung turns to call for his mother, but before he can act, a hand suddenly shoves him through the black gateway. Despite her horrific transformation, Jisung's mother tells him to go and forget everything as a large bouquet of flowers erupts from her mouth. Jisung screams for his mother as he is finally cast out of that dimension and returned to his own world. Jisung stares at the strange mural he created and punches the wall in a rage, screaming and asking why he was the only one spared. He kneels in despair as news reports break regarding the mysterious disappearance of 43 cult members from his residential area. Jisung recalls being moved between shelters before his grandmother took him in, though he was haunted by nightmares every night. He remembers being covered in red fluid, as the sensory details of that place remained vivid in his dreams until they finally began to fade. Years later, Jisung is seen playing rock, paper, scissors with his classmates as they shout out in unison during their game. His friends celebrate their narrow victory while Jisung, now an 8th grader, laughs and teases them for being cowards. They stare at an abandoned building as his friends joke about his fear, telling him they won't wait if he is too scared to proceed. Despite suggestions to just buy a new ball, Jisung jokes about playing with ghosts and enters the building with a flashlight. Jisung realizes it is not that frightening and follows the ball deep into the area until he finally locates it and reaches out to pick it up. The ball suddenly slips from his grasp, and as he looks up, he discovers a strange, faded symbol drawn on the wall before him. In Chapter 40, Jisung wakes up in a state of confusion while a man lectures on stage, questioning why that specific symbol is present as painful memories of his mother return. Overwhelmed with anxiety and breaking into a cold sweat, he feels an urgent need to leave, yet he wonders if this place could lead him to his mother. He envisions himself rushing toward the symbol, though he understands that such a hope is likely an impossible fantasy. Driven by curiosity, he decides he must investigate the symbol and determine if it can be found in other locations. Jisung pushes forward despite his heavy breathing and exhaustion, fully committed to finding that unique mark. He begins a journey across the country to explore abandoned structures, from old warehouses filled with crates to tunnels sealed off by the authorities. His search eventually yields results, though the symbol only appears in about 1 out of every 100 sites, and the high travel expenses weigh heavily on him. Closing his eyes, he considers a previously suggested method, while remembering how others criticized his eccentric behavior and aimless wandering of ruin. Faced with harsh criticism for his lack of financial success, Jisung decides to pivot his efforts toward live streaming his exploration. He introduces himself to his audience while visiting Dusang Girls' High School, a location notorious for a ghost rumored to haunt the ceiling. His persistence eventually pays off as he amasses 280,000 followers and produces 42 videos documenting his findings. Using an EMF meter to aid his search, Jisung stands before another symbol with 390,000 followers watching, yet he remains unable to find any joy in his success. Despite discovering 5 symbols in total, he feels he has made no real progress and decides to try different approaches, including hiring a shaman for an exorcism. He prays fervently and sings hymns, refusing to give up as he attempts various rituals to summon spirits, but every effort proves to be in vain. Falling back into a state of despair and hopelessness, Jisung happens to notice an image of Hyun on his screen. Deciding to try one last time, he approaches Hyun and directly asks if the other man truly has the ability to see ghosts. He reflects on the past, realizing that if nothing changes even with someone who can see spirits, he must move on, despite Hyun's angry demands for him to leave. Ji-sung resolves to finally give up if this attempt fails, even as he continues to follow Hyun despite the younger man's hostile rejection. Yi-sung's eyes betray his tension as a phantom stream of water seems to flow over his face, washing away his past memory. Lessa appears within the bizarre space with a radiant expression, prompting Yi-sung to reach out toward her while presenting a series of images. When asked to choose from the images, Lee Hyun hesitates before finally pointing to one specific photo, a choice that leaves Yi-sung feeling surprised. Yi-sung is confused by the selection of the abandoned school, but he realizes it is of little consequence since symbols have already been found in all 5 locations. As they climb higher, Yi-sung thinks to himself that if Lee Hyun truly is the key to this place, he will eventually kneel and beg the boy for forgiveness. He makes a firm vow that no matter what happens, he will not allow Lee Hyun to die, even if it requires sacrificing his own life. Yi-sung smiles in the face of his past hardships, but as a massive hand grabs him, he suddenly notices something peculiar about a nearby wall. Crouching in the darkness to examine the wall, Yi-sung finally understands that his previous failures were all connected to a single realization. While other symbols were complete, he is certain this one is not, leading Yi-sung to deliberately cut his own hand. Realizing the mechanism will only activate if he completes the symbol himself, he places his hand on the wall so the door will finally open. Yi-sung is certain that this path serves as an exit, and he becomes aware that his next task is to find more incomplete symbols in the outside world. By completing these symbols, he can open the gateway to Lessa's paradise, even as a swarm of insects begins to cover his face. He quickly brushes the insects off as the strange environment surprises him, with hands emerging from the ground to reach for him while calling his name. A series of hands reach out to touch his face and embrace him, welcoming him back and expressing how much his mother has missed him. Lessa smiles warmly at her son, causing Yi-sung to freeze for a moment before he rushes into the waiting arms and sobs at their reunion. Yi-sung apologizes for being the only one to escape previously and promises to do his best to save her so they can leave the area together. When he asks her to come with him, Lessa explains that she died long ago and would completely vanish if she were to ever leave this place. She asks Yi-sung if he truly wants her to disappear forever, knowing that he would never be able to see her again. Not wanting him to be consumed by sadness, Lessa gently tells Yi-sung that they have both suffered enough and urges him to simply return home. Lessa's only desire is to return to their happy home of the past, a place with his father and mother where pain and sorrow do not exist. Lessa reaches out to her son and promises they can finally be together in peace as he takes her hand to follow her home. Suddenly, someone grabs Yi-sung's wrist as Hyun berates him for his foolishness and tells him to wake up. A bizarre scene unfolds under a dark red sky, where a girl with long black hair covering her face is bound by a ribbon. Hyun and Yi-sung both witness the sight and rush toward her in a panic, as Hyun screams out in alarm. Believing Ohana is dead because she is motionless, Hyun approaches only for her to look up and explain she was also captured. Hyun anxiously tells her to get down, but Hana calmly explains that her body is completely unable to move. She calls out to Obo to stop his ridiculous game before their mother scolds him, prompting him to suddenly appear. He arrogantly claims their mother's methods are wrong and insists that his own way will be far more effective. Hyun lunges to attack but misses, finding himself suddenly transported to a pitch-black space where he wonders what is happening. In the oppressive silence of the darkness, Hyun investigates a noise only to witness a truly gruesome and savage scene. A young boy repeatedly stabs a man on a bed before smiling at Hyun and accusing him of being his father's killer. The boy's words shatter Hyun's psychological defenses, leaving him trapped in a state of agonizing self-reproach and terror. Lost in a state of mental chaos, Hyun is forced to watch as his 4 closest friends are brutally murdered. As blood stains the floor, Yi-sung is transformed into a child and seized by a long-haired monster claiming to be his mother. The creature uses manipulative words to keep him from leaving, but a terrified Yi-sung manages to break free and flee. He encounters grotesque, talking demonic flowers that mock him for being a traitor who only knows how to run away alone. The flowers taunt him for his inability to protect anyone and question why he even bothered to return. As Yi Sung falters, the monster's voice rises from behind, asking if he hates her for having turned into a corpse. The screaming monster pushes him with hands emerging from its face, causing the entire reality to collapse around him. Falling toward a giant, gaping mouth, a despairing Yi Sung weeps as he remembers that his mother was the one who saved him. As his despair reaches its peak, Yi Sung begins to stutter and torment himself with the guilt of feeling relieved just to be alive. While these repetitive thoughts haunt him, a voice from the void whispers in Yi Sung's ear, tempting him to take his own life. Pale, skeletal hands guide Yi Sung's grip on a knife, pressing it against his throat until he finally ends his own life. From the outside, Hana watches as their souls begin to shatter, lamenting the misery of humans as black energy pours from their body. Observing the emotions escaping them, Hana realizes her only option is to consume them, despite her disgust for such foul feeling. Hana decides to help by eating the excess negativity, which allows Hyun and Yi Sung to feel a sudden sense of mental clarity in their separate realm. The suffocating weight of their suppressed emotions vanishes in an instant, leaving behind a hollow sense of fear, guilt, and loss. Though the pain is immense, Hyun finds peace by finally accepting his past and being honest with himself. Hyun embraces his past while Yi Sung fights back against the monster and demonic flowers, shouting that he only wanted to survive. Determined to find a way out of his personal hell, Yi Sung sees a ray of light emerge from the darkness as a sign of hope. After a long history of suffering, a glimmer of happiness appears as Hyun and Yi Sung look down to see Hana looking pale. Hyun Sung wonders if Hana is trapped in a nightmare until she suddenly wakes up and spits out a small marble. Hana reflects on the many foul emotions she consumed while Hyun asks if she is alright, only for her to irritably push them both away. Adopting a serious expression, Hana tells them they must leave immediately just as the marble in her hand begins to crack. Because Obo is causing total chaos, Hana looks up at the sky and witnesses a truly bizarre and unsettling sight. Yi Sung and Hyun are stunned to see the sky filled with souls, and Yi Sung wonders how he is able to see them. Hana explains that they are still within the boundary, before shouting at Obo for recklessly breaking the established rule. Obo looks down with relief and tells Hana not to be angry, arguing that his actions will ultimately benefit their mother. Hana argues that mother's intent is to bring pure souls to their world, but Obo finds that process too tedious and prefers forced adaptation. Obo believes that by snatching hundreds of souls at once, some will eventually adapt, allowing them to increase their numbers through theft. Obo's plan was cruel from the start, breaking their spirits before commanding the giant mouth beside him to begin the harvest. Hyun watches in horror as souls are sucked in and rushes toward his bespectacled friend to save him from the same fate. He narrowly misses his friend's arm before Hana approaches, asking if they can provoke Obo to test a theory. After a brief discussion, Hyun realizes that his only task is to make the creature lose its temper. As the foul mouth devours souls, Hyun hitches a ride by grabbing a soul's leg and flying upward, leaving Obo stunned. Hyun releases his grip and delivers a powerful punch to Ji Sung's face, catching the villain completely off guard. Blood streams from Hyun's nose as Ji Sung also hitches a ride on a soul to deliver a follow-up attack. Ji Sung lands a fiery kick right on Obo's chin before losing his grip and falling through the air. Ji Sung catches another soul to steady himself while Hyun climbs onto another, apologizing for his rough footing. Hyun realizes they can physically interact with spirits here, while Obo finds that his wounds heal but the pain remains. Despite absorbing many emotions, Obo is unfamiliar with physical pain and realizes it is fueling his growing rage. The souls transform into tangled masses and fall into the black water as Hyun also begins to plummet. Hyun asks Ji Sung if he can swim, but sees his friend is being swarmed by spirits and unable to move. Turning to Hana for a plan, Hyun finds her accidentally swallowing mouthfuls of the dark water. As they all sink into the depths, the three of them quickly grab hold of each other's hands. Hana believes they can succeed within the subconscious and shares her power, transferring a green energy to her companion. She instructs them to absorb the soul's trauma just enough for the spirits to regain their will and find a way to escape. They allow themselves to be dragged down by the water demons, understanding that trauma is an emotional interpretation of an event. A flashback shows a young Hana being scolded by her mother and hiding a test paper as she heads to her room. Once inside her dark room, Hana finally lets her true emotions out and sits on her bed, weeping and pleading. Desperate for love and praise, Hana is suddenly startled into a scream when a talking teddy bear approaches and waves at her. The bear looks at her test and praises her achievement, making Hana blush as it nods in approval of her hard work. It acknowledges the immense effort she put in despite the lack of recognition, and how her hands trembled with the weight of it all. Transforming into her exact likeness, the bear embraces her and offers comfort, promising that she is not alone and will be okay. As a dark shadow begins to emerge from her back, a hand reaches out just in time to seize and pull the entity away. Elsewhere, students mock a boy over a syrup-stained notebook, cruelly insulting him and calling him a pig. They continue their harassment by poking him with a pen and mocking his lack of reaction to their parasitic insults. The boy suddenly retaliates by stabbing the bully's hand, and as the bully cries out, a gorilla unexpectedly appears at the door. The gorilla glares at the boy before charging forward, sending the terrified students fleeing in confusion. Panic ensues as the students find the door locked, leaving some paralyzed with fear at the sight of the beast. The boy stands by in shock, trembling as he listens to the desperate cries for help from those around him. The gorilla places an arm around the boy's shoulder and mocks the others for being so easily frightened. It provokes him by describing his physical fear when facing the bullies, causing the boy to lower his head in shame. Claiming the bullies are no match for a gorilla, it offers to remove the boy's unnecessary fear from his life. The creature reaches into the boy's chest to pull out a dark mask before waving a cheerful goodbye. It tells him to fear gorillas from now on, leaving the boy standing there in a state of confused shock. He suddenly snaps awake in the hallway, dismissing the encounter as a strange dream, while the scene shifts to a sick child in a hospital. The child's eyes brighten as he reaches for falling snow, unaware that Hyun is the one distributing the artificial flakes from above. Another child plays on the gorilla's arm, while a young girl weeps over the body of her small, lifeless kitten. As she cries, a stream of blue light from Hyun passes by, causing the kitten's spirit to gently ascend. The gorilla waves a cheerful goodbye before departing, having protected the boy even during family disputes or when he nearly fell while learning to ride a bike. Though the boy closes his eyes in fear, he remains unharmed because his father is always there to catch him. The father supports his son through life's first trials as the scene returns to the black cubes where the gorillas emerged from their heart. The students suddenly wake up in tears from the confusing dream, while Obo irritably demands to know what Hana's problem is. Despite the ribbon tightening around her neck, Hana calmly tells Obo to release the souls he swallowed, but he ignores her request. Obo decides to kill her and leave quickly, noting that their mother told them to live in harmony despite his frustration. Hana suddenly kicks him in the face with a look of provocation, sending Obo into a murderous rage. Realizing they cannot truly die, Obo decides to inflict enough pain on her to make her crave death instead. He uses his power to summon hands from a puddle that restrain Hana and pull her down, further tightening the ribbon around her throat. Hana looks at him with disdain, mocking how easily provoked and impulsive he is, behaving just like a child. She notes that Obo is still incomplete, as these beings were created without emotions and seek to absorb them from others. They strive to become their mother's perfect children by consuming emotions, even while recovering from fatal injuries. While the others went into the world to feed, they found that absorbing emotions has limits on capacity and timing, often causing physical discomfort. Exceeding their limit leads to a painful overload, yet Obo simply stretches and prepares to leave after dealing with Hana. He orders his demons to return, as the faces of many teenagers begin to surface from the surging wave. A massive mouth above begins to vacuum up the soulless bodies, including Yi Sung and Hyun. Seeing this, Hana shouts for them to throw the shizu pouring from her eyes and mouth directly into the entity. They follow her instructions and hurl the black mud at Obo, knowing his body can only process so much at once. Hana's plan relies on the fact that exceeding his threshold will cause a violent rejection, yet his instincts force him to swallow everything. After instinctively absorbing the black slime, Obo is overcome by a surge of intense pain that forces his body to self-destruct. Thousands of souls pour out from the hole in the man's face, causing him to lose control and reveal his hideous true form as he realizes the spirits are escaping. Below, Rhea Sung and Hyun catch their breath and wonder if the battle is over, unaware that this is only the beginning of the ordeal. Driven by madness, Obo evolves into a new form and declares that everyone present will meet their end in this place. The entire area suddenly collapses into a landscape of jagged peaks, and though Hyun falls while screaming, he manages to cling to a shard of rock. While hanging precariously, Hyun calls out to check on the others and sees that Ji-sung has unfortunately been impaled by a sharp rock. Hyun rushes toward his friend while shouting his name, hoping to escape so they can recover, but Hana warns him that leaving is impossible. She explains that they are trapped in Obo's domain and must kill him to escape, noting that he possesses godlike power within this realm. Hana calculates that they need to compress one more emotion, and when Hyun offers his own, she explains that a small amount will not be sufficient. Hana asks if Hyun is willing to become an emotionless shell, but as the blonde man offers up all of his own emotions, the white-haired man suddenly appears. The newcomer seizes Hyun's arm and instantly cripples it, leaving him screaming in pain before turning a murderous gaze toward Hana and striking her down. Hyun is stunned by the sight, but seeing she is still alive, the blonde-haired Hyun follows her instruction to touch her. As he does, he is overwhelmed by a surge of joy and sorrow while a black sword emerges from her mouth, and Hana commands him to drive the blade into their enemy's heart. He immediately charges forward to carry out the task, unaffected by the sharp stones the enemy hurls at him, as his body has become completely immune to the sensation of pain. Driven by the single-minded goal of killing his opponent, Hyun lunges forward while Hana uses her powers to bind the enemy in place, preventing any chance of escape. Hyun puts all his strength into a final thrust through the enemy's heart, causing the villain's body to shatter into pieces and ending the battle. Hana then returns the borrowed emotions to her two friends, though the feelings have become jumbled together. Despite the lingering discomfort of their mixed emotions, the bond between them has grown much deeper as they finally prepare to head back home.